Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
Hello, Keith.
Hello, Joe.
What's happening, man? Thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me. This is great. Great to be in the new studio.
It's polarizing. Some like it, some do not. It has a weird effect on people. I never thought it was going to be a big deal. I just thought people would go, "Oh, this place looks weird," and that would be the end of it.
Well, it's kind of a interdimensional hypertube. The red pill? What's the name?
Some people call it the red pill. I don't know. It's just the studio for now.
It's cool.
Thank you.
It feels good to be here. It feels good. Nice studio.
It feels good to have you here.
Thank you.
We tested you up. What were you saying about testing? That it's not, unless you're sick, it's not good to test often?
Well, no, I mean, as a psychologist, when you're doing psychological testing, if I wanted to see if somebody has a mental disorder, I just don't go screen a bunch of people. I wait for somebody to show up in a hospital that's got troubles.
Right.
Because if I go give the screen to a bunch of people, I'm going to find a bunch of people who test as mentally ill but aren't. They're not doing anything wrong. They just have some symptoms, but they might not have all the trouble that brings them to a hospital.
Or maybe they do, but they just never make their way to a hospital?
Well, it's working out for them. So part of the... the thing is, you can be weird and it works, or you can be an angry person or a mean person or a self-absorbed person, or whatever. If it works for you, then it's not a disorder. You kind of just go through your life. If it's impairing, it becomes a disorder, and then we treat you.
But how does one define whether or not it's impairing you? Like, you could argue that the president of the United States has some psychological disorders, but clearly hasn't impaired him from being successful unless you check his taxes.
This is a debate I've had, a discussion I've had a lot, and the question is, so with somebody like Donald Trump. Somebody says he has a disorder, and you say, well, as billionaire president of the United States who doesn't pay a lot of taxes, the guy sounds like he's kind of killing it to me. How's that a disorder? And somebody else says, well, imagine how good he'd be if he didn't have any disorders and was totally sane. Imagine if he was doing that but had Pence's personality. He'd really be killing it. And somebody says, but Pence doesn't do it because he's not wired that way. You got to have Trump's personality to do that kind of craziness. So it's a debate.
Well, not only that, I don't even know what personality Pence has.
That's the point.
I have no idea what's in there.
He comes across as somebody with a very balanced personality, not very extroverted, but probably very conscientious, very probably moral and upright. So he come across as somebody with rectitude, So in personality terms, we might say he's somebody who's conscientious and probably agreeable, but not really extroverted, calm.
Is there debate on whether someone should be treated or even someone should be discussed as someone who has mental health issues or personality issues, even if they're doing well? Because like the way you're describing it, you're saying like, well, someone's successful, they're doing well, why bother looking at these things?
To be treated, you need to have clinically significant impairment to get the diagnosis. So if there's no impairment, it's really not, you're not supposed to treat somebody. At that point, you're just coaching them.
But what if someone is like super successful, but they're like, you know what, I've been talked to lately, and people sat me down and said, hey man, you're a narcissist. There's something wrong with you. And then they come to see you, and you start talking to them and say, well, you have all this good stuff going for you.
Right.
You would still treat them, right?
Yeah. So if somebody comes in, though, what this person's coming in is probably somebody who's very successful in a lot of things and has problems probably in their relationships. Like, my marriage is screwed up. My kids hate me.
Let's say the president. Because what if he listens to this podcast? And he's like, tremendous podcast.
It's tremendous.
I might have an issue. I'd like to talk to Keith. And he decides to talk to you.
Yeah.
But you would say, but you are a billionaire and you're the president and you obviously are doing well. Would you treat him?
I would, if Trump actually talked to me, and I would say, where are those choke points or those problem points in your life where your ego is screwing up your desire to be the best person in the world? You want to be the most successful president in the history of the universe. Where is your ego messing you up? Are you tweeting, too much? Are you getting too mean at people who, like, if some rando criticizes you, do you get hostile too quickly and look unstable? Is your marriage okay? I don't know. He seems to be okay in that department right now. But I'd sort of look at those points where it's influenced him negatively and say, what can we do to fix those?
It's an interesting descriptor, like the best person you can be or the best person in the world. If you did that, maybe you wouldn't be successful. Like, that's part of the issue too, right? Like,
that's the challenge, is that when you look at people, let's say you look at income. If men who are kind of jerks make more money. People who are less agreeable make more money. They're more antagonistic. They're a little more competitive. They're willing to break the rules a little bit. So there's this balance in life, whereas if you're too nice of a person, you're not able to break enough things to get ahead. But if you're going around breaking things, you become a tyrant and no one likes you and everyone wants to take you down.
Well, there's also like, by what metric are we measuring success? Are we measuring success only in financial success? Are we measuring success in like happiness with your friends and your family and, like a balanced life with your loved ones?
Yeah, meaning. And so when we talk about that, where you're going to see somebody like, Trump or somebody very narcissistic who's very achievement, status focused, they're going to succeed at those metrics. Status being number one, wealth is a pretty good proxy for status. So wealth and status, where you typically fall apart is in those interpersonal realms. You just don't have the compassion, you don't have the caring, you don't give time for people.
Empathy.
You don't have a lot of empathy. And so those relationships are usually what suffer. And so with people who are really status focused, the thing that costs is their relationships, because they're pursuing fame or status or whatever. And that's fine, everybody makes those choices. The problem is if you're doing it all the time and you're manipulating people and using people, it can be more of a problem.
Is there any evolutionary benefit to narcissism? Like, where does that come from? Because does it exist in the animal kingdom?
Yes. So if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, which some people have, narcissism seems to be really good for short-term mating success. Like if I go to a bar in downtown Austin and I give narcissism questionnaires to all the dudes there, the higher scores are going to get the most numbers over time. That's usually what happens. So narcissism is usually good for short-term mating, and it's good for status seeking, power seeking. So it's probably beneficial in those contexts, and this is where it gets a little weird, because in stable environments, like in research in hunter-gatherer societies, in stable environments, if somebody's cheating on other people's wives or stealing stuff or steals extra food, people don't like that. They'll just kill them. I mean, they'll just go have a hunting accident. If you're kind of the dick in the hunter-gatherer society, they'll take you out and you just won't come back because they just don't want you.
Right.
But so narcissism gets weeded out in those places. But when things get unstable and things are uncertain, people who are narcissistic can get a lot of resources and do really well. So sometimes they do well, which keeps it around. And obviously in big societies, you can become powerful enough to hire henchmen and hire a PR agent, and you can kind of build your own status and do a lot more than you can in a hunter-gatherer group where everyone knows you.
What is narcissism when you define it? Like, what is your definition of narcissism?
So it gets a little more complicated. When we're talking like this, I'm talking about grandiose narcissism, and that's a basic
There's
trait.
more than one kind of narcissism.
Yeah, I'll step back. So when we talk about narcissism, in the psychological literature, we're talking about three different things that are related. The first of these is narcissistic personality, and this is a trait, and meaning that people go from a high level to a low level. It's not a clinical disorder. And in this trait, when it's grandiose, we say grandiose narcissism, it's this combination of sense of entitlement and a sense of superiority, but also you get extroversion and drive and ambition. Call it agentic extroversion. So somebody who's driven and extroverted, but also a little bit self-centered and antagonistic and entitled. So that combination of traits, kind of a prima donna or, overconfident or cocky or whatever you want to call it, that's what we talk about is grandiose narcissism. And that's just like I said, normal trait. There's another form of narcissism, which we don't talk about as much in the normal world, but that's vulnerable narcissism. And these are the folks that are kind of think they're really important, think they should be getting a lot of attention, think they're the smartest people in the room, but no one really looks at them. No one pays attention to them. So they get insecure, they get depressed, their self-esteem drops. They think, why aren't I getting the attention I deserved? I'm kind of a legend. It's a legend in their own minds. So you're talking about this like basement narcissists, living in their mom's basement, thinking how great they are and fantasizing about it. And those more vulnerable folks, you don't see at the bars as much because they're in the basement, but you see them clinically because they're depressed and they go see a clinician and say, help me out, I'm anxious. So those are the two normal forms of narcissism, their traits. And then there's this clinical form or psychiatric form called narcissistic personality disorder. NPD. And that personality disorder form of narcissism is an extreme form of narcissism. You have a high level of it, like Trump or, a lot of probably celebrities or, academics. But you also, to make it a clinical disorder, you have to have that impairment we're talking about. So it has to be clinically significant impairment. And that's usually the narcissism is so bad, your marriage or your relationships are falling apart. Your work life could be falling apart. So sometimes you find narcissistic, really successful people in offices who are narcissists, but they kind of destroy the office culture. They're just bad workers. And so you can destroy that. You can make really poor decisions because your ego's so big. You just, overinvest in something and it just doesn't work out for you. So you start dysregulating your financial decisions. So you can make kind of those kind of mistakes. The big ones are usually interpersonal. But when you have that kind of impairment, it can be a disorder, and then you get treated for it.
The vulnerable personality disorder is fascinating.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating one because you see a lot of that on social media in particular, right? You see people that feel like they should be getting more attention than they are and don't understand why and feel upset by that or shortchanged.
Social media is such a strange beast because it gives everybody the chance to have a camera and have the audience of 1 billion people. So I could go on there and get a billion audience, but I have to earn that. And so you have lots of people that go, look, I can have 1 billion people in my audience, but I don't have those people. Why aren't they there? Who's screwing me over and not giving where are my followers?
Yeah.
Why aren't I getting the followers?
I saw a guy the other day talking about being shadow banned, and he had 1,000 friends. Yeah. And I'm like, are you sure?
Yeah.
Are you sure you're shadow banned? Are you sure people are just not interested in what you're saying?
Yeah, maybe you're just not that interesting.
But that's the weirdest thing to ever say. Like, I'm being shadow banned. Do you have evidence of this? Like, what is happening here?
Well, you're kind of an outlaw.
This is not saying that shadow banning is not real. But like people are using that as an excuse for why they're not getting the attention that they deserve.
Right. I would be the next Joe Rogan if it weren't for those dastardly shadow banners taking me down, holding me back.
They know that they can't silence me.
They can't. Yeah. That if I got out there, I would change the world. But these guys are holding me back. Yeah, and you can see how that turns into like a delusional system if you get, with sort of more schizophrenia, where there's a whole world of people out there trying to hold me down.
Yeah, I want to get to that too. Yeah. I wanted to ask you if schizophrenia. We might as well get to it right now. Is there a connection between schizophrenia and narcissism? Because many people who are schizophrenic have these grandiose ideas of who they are or who they should be or where they fit in that are these ridiculously distorted perceptions of reality.
Yeah, so grandiosity you can see with narcissism, with I have this fantasy about how great I am, this illusion, but it's usually within the scope of reality. So if I'm talking to somebody narcissistic, they're like, I'm a 10, I'm pretty awesome. You're like, not really, man. You're just not, you're okay, but like maybe go back to the gym, but it's usually not, it's not crazy.
Right.
I was working in a hospital with a woman who was a patient who said that she was the tooth fairy. And she worked for Reagan as the tooth fairy. I thought, well, that's a grandiose delusion. Reagan wasn't president, but he was still helping her behind the scenes. That's a grandiose delusion, but you wouldn't call that narcissistic because she wasn't really, her personality was really narcissistic. She was more schizophrenic in her presentation, kind of flat affect, a little bit strange, odd or unusual. anhedonia, sort of lack of feeling and stuff, but those weird delusions. So you can have those grandiose delusions, but it's not quite the same as narcissism. It seems to be working a little differently. And the other place you see them is mania, with like bipolar disorder. People get really manic, and they get these manic phases, and they're like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to build this, I'm going to take over this, my record's going to be the best. And that mania can look like narcissism too. And those are probably more closely linked.
The psychological disorders that we're aware of, the ones like narcissism, the ones like schizophrenia, like, do we know what's happening in the mind that causes a distortion of reality? Is it ego protecting you from the truth? Is it a chemical imbalance? Is it a series of things that all coincide? Like when you have someone who's both a narcissist and possibly schizophrenic.
With narcissism, it's very hard to detect anything that's sort of clearly biological, like and this is true for all personality, really. People have been looking at this last 5 years pretty hard for sort of biomarkers or neural structures. You don't really see them very clearly. You do with schizophrenia. There's some.
What is it with schizophrenia?
And I was going to say, it's not my area, and I don't want to. I say, Jamie, if I say anything wrong, just check me and call me out, because I don't want to screw up anything.
He's the best one-handed Googler on earth.
Please do that. Because there's that. There's the old stuff about kind of plaque in the brain and things like with Alzheimer's. You see some missing neural structure, but that's just out of my area.
I understand.
But with personality, you generally don't see it in there. You just can't find it so far. And when you look at genetics, you know it's in the genes, but there's no single genes. It's like a swarms of genes.
So it isn't. So if your father is a narcissist, are you more or less likely to be a narcissist?
More.
But what if you learn from your father? You're like, my God, my father's ruined his life. Like many alcoholics have children that won't touch liquor, and I've known quite a few of them. Yeah.
So in the clinical literature, they talk about that as sort of that you sort of identify with them, or you do the opposite of the father. So if the alcoholic father, like you said, and you become a teetotaler, or your father's a narcissist, you become really nice.
Yeah.
We don't really see that. What you tend to see, I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen, because I know it happens, but what you tend to see in the literature with these big family studies is that traits like narcissism and all personality, and really all mental disorders, they tend to follow family lines, so they're heritable. But it's not really clear how that happens.
So whether it's nurture or nature.
Right. I mean, it's in there, but we don't know exactly what the genes are. And when they start to look at the nurture question with a lot of personality, what you find is about, and when they break these down into heredity coefficients, they don't mean exactly what they sound, but generally you find it's about 50-60% heritable. You're born with it, probably genetic, and maybe 10% is parenting, and maybe the other 30-40% is something in the environment that's just not really clear what it is.
The environment, really?
Yeah, just random environment. So that's why you have kids. And you have two. I have two daughters. They're very different people. Part of that's genetics, obviously. They're very different, but it's also their environment. I might have been a similar parent to both of them, but they have different friends. They grew up in a little different time, a little different culture, and all those forces affect you in ways you don't really understand. So a lot of what happens to us is this non-shared environment we just can't really explain. Parenting is pretty small.
Really?
Yeah, it's weird. What we say about parenting is that it really doesn't make much of a difference, but it matters. So, I have two daughters, and the idea that I could change them into the one into the other through my parenting skills. I could take my one daughter who loves to dance, and I could turn her into the one that loves, math, and I could take the math one and turn her into. No, I couldn't do that in a million years. They're just different people.
Yeah.
No way. So I can't really shape my kid's personality very well. I mean, parents just can't really do that. But you matter a lot. You put food on the table. You provide a safe environment. You're not threatening the kids. You're not. There's a lot you do as a parent that matters. But you can't really fine tune your kids' personalities very well. I mean, I don't even try.
But what can you do if you think one of your children has narcissistic personality disorder, or is there's a spectrum of narcissism, right? Yeah. Somewhere in there, you're like, there's something here I have to address.
Well, I mean, people ask me this a lot because they're like, they don't want their kids to be entitled little
Right.
jerks. I mean, you just don't want that. And the number one thing is you try not to be that yourself, be a good role model. And that's, something, we all struggle with. The advice I give with parenting, I hate to call it advice, but sort of the mnemonic I give is CPR, just so people remember it. But these are things to focus on. So the thing with narcissism is having an ego. Like your kid's like, I'm going to be president. You're not like, shut up. You're never going to be president, you loser. I mean, you're not going to go beat your kid. It's not,
Right.
You don't have to stuff your kids, but kids dream. That's great. It's not going at the ego part. It's more going at the interpersonal part more. So when I say CPR, it's compassion, passion, responsibility. And so the compassion piece is big. And so a lot of it with kids is focusing on like, can you be a nice person? Are you nice to your sister? You're nice to animals. If your kids are killing, drowning pets, I'd be a little worried, But if they're loving pets and they're loving things, I'm like, people who are generally compassionate don't become that narcissistic.
Right.
They can be a little narcissistic, but compassion's a big buffer. So I think that's really important. And people think about that. The one people think about a little less is passion, like getting really excited about stuff. So if it's, like for you, let's say you're into archery and you're just stoked about it and you're telling your kids about archery and you shot an elk and it was the greatest day ever. No one's like, God, there goes Joe. He's bragging again, just talking about what a great shot he is. It doesn't sound like that because you're showing passion. You're not like, I'm not the best shooter. This is just awesome. Let me tell you about it. So if you get your kids into things that give them that passion, sometimes we use the word flow in psychology. I don't know if they talk about flow states or getting in those flow states when you're really engaged in what you're doing and getting feedback. Is that something you know? Okay.
Sure.
Yeah. So you get in those flow states and you get that sense of passion. When you do that, you're able to engage in a task, get really good at it, tell people about it, bring them into it, but not be a jerk. Because it's not about you being better than anyone. It's about enjoyment. And then the third piece, this responsibility piece, is just take responsibility for your damn life. Not just the thing with narcissism, it's really easy to take responsibility for success. But what do you do when you fail? And how can you learn to fail and then say, I failed, I screwed up, it's on me, and keep going. And so taking responsibility for your failures and learning to be responsible for your own action. Again, it's a buffer against narcissism. It's hard to get too big of an ego when you see yourself failing over and over and you have to admit it. It keeps your ego in check.
Well, we were actually talking about admitting failure before the podcast, and I think it's a giant part of getting people to listen to you. If you don't admit failure, they're going to go, oh, this he pretends he's never wrong, or this guy pretends he never fucks up. I'm not, and then they're looking at you and they're like, well, this person, I'm not going to take what they say very seriously because I know they're looking at life through a distorted lens.
Right.
Because their lens is not accurate. It's not objective. They're not considering all the different things that other people see in them.
Yes, because their lens is colored by their own ego.
Yes.
And they can't see past their own ego.
And
so they're just,
ego and narcissism are inexorably connected.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's like you got the ego glasses on. Whenever you get to a certain area, it's this kind of blind spot. And then the world's insane, right? And we're all trying to figure out what's real. And I just listen to people. And when I hear people that screw up and they say they're sorry or they make mistakes, I can trust that person.
Right.
When people never make mistakes, I get nervous.
Yeah, you should.
I go into class and I'm like, I'm going to be right 80% of the time in here. You guys Google everything I say because it's hard to be. You can't be interesting and right 100% of the time. It's just not possible.
Right. Especially if you're thinking out loud. Right.
Right.
And when the idea that ego and narcissism are connected, I think there's a benefit to ego in that you value yourself and you value your own success, and that will force you to work hard, and that will equal, some success in whatever you're trying to achieve. But is there a value in narcissism? Or is it possible to be ambitious and achieve things, but do so in a compassionate and objective way where you're not distorting your own view of yourself? You're not alienating other people with some asinine perspective of who you are.
It's a very challenging question, and I think about this one a lot. And I'm going to give you my short answer and then my longer answer because it's more complicated. The short answer is this line I heard from Bob Dylan, but it was attributed to Liam Clancy from the Clancy Brothers, which is no fear, no meanness, no envy. I hope I got that right. No fear, no envy, no meanness. But it's and this is about how to live a creative life. And it's the idea was you need to be fearless. You need to be bold to change things. That piece of narcissism, which we sometimes call fearless dominance or boldness, this sort of extroversion and drive, that will get you into trouble sometimes because you're taking risks. But generally, you have to take those risks to get successful. You have to take risks. So that boldness seems to be something that's pretty useful for things. Where you get in trouble is the meanness. It's being mean to people, that antagonism. Like, I'm going to start a podcast, and first thing I'm going to do is take out the competition. You know, like a lion. You know, like lions in the savannah, they are in whatever forest. They'll wipe out every predator out there. They'll see a hunting dog. They'll just kill them because they're like predators. So that meanness, that piece of narcissism will get you into trouble all the time, and it ruins your relationships. And the third piece is insecurity. And sometimes with narcissism, that might manifest as envy. Oh my God, look how successful that comedian is. He's got that HBO special. That should be mine. And you stew in envy. It's hard to get ahead when you got envy. And then so of those three pieces, the boldness piece is, I think, the one that matters. The other piece with success is whatever we do, for most of us, our success is interpersonal. We're working in fields. We might be in medicine or in psychology or in comedy or entertainment or, whatever the field is, farming. You have to work. All those people are your competitors or also your cooperators. And if they all hate you, they're not going to want to work with you anymore. So there's this old saying, like, I mean, you must know this from entertainment. I don't know this, but there are things like, be nice to people on the way up because you're going to see them on the way back down and stuff like that.
Sure.
So there's got to be something where if you're just kind of an arrogant SOB, people don't want you around and it's going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Because they just don't want you there. So the narcissism is really just messing up your ability to succeed because you don't have any friends. But if you're willing to take risks and be bold, people will be friends with you. Because it's kind of fun to be friends with somebody who takes risks and is gutsy. And
some people that have that vulnerable narcissism will be upset at you. And that's a weird one when you see people do well and the other people are actually upset that the person is doing well because they think that somehow or another it should be them that gets these things.
And it's not a small thing. In the relationships world, there's this term called capitalization. So when something good happens to you, like, hey, I have a book come out today. I'm like, hey, I got a book come out. It's great. Who do I tell? Well, if I go tell people who are envious, then they're just going to be mad at me. If I go tell people who are jealous, I'm just going to make them feel bad. I don't want to make people feel bad. But I've got a couple friends who are they're not insecure.
Right.
And they're like, dude, I'm really proud. That's really awesome.
That's a disturbing moment when you tell a friend about some good things that happen. Like, oh, great, another great thing happened to you. Oh, awesome. Good for you, Keith.
Yeah.
You're out there killing it. Meanwhile, I could barely pay my bills, Keith.
Just in the basement, watching Netflix.
Fuck. What does that have to do with what I'm saying? Shouldn't you be happy?
Yeah, please. I thought we were friends, man.
Some people just don't want other people to do well because it forces them to look at their own achievements or their own life and their own relationships, their own, like some people don't like it when people are involved in relationships. They try to sabotage those relationships. It's weird.
Yeah. Well, if my narrative were like marriage doesn't work, and then I see my buddy who's married, I'm like, damn, there goes my narrative. So I could either change the story to like Keith doesn't work, It's
not going to work forever, bro. One of you's going to die.
Yeah. And so, but that's that vulnerable narcissism piece, that insecurity. I always that Joe Pesci in that movie Miller's Crossing. Do you remember?
I don't remember that
like,
movie.
You're looking at me, or who are you laughing at? Was that Miller's Crossing?
No,
it's maybe a different movie.
Wasn't that
Goodfellas? Yeah, that's it. That's right. Thank you, Jamie. He's on it. I could see him. Like that scene though, where somebody's so insecure that a waiter smiling.
Yeah,
it's like what kind of loser lets a smiling waiter put him into a tantrum? But that's that vulnerability. And what you're seeing is it's very easy to exploit in people, because if you see where their vulnerability is, you can just poke them.
But it's just fascinating that there's all these different parts of a human being's personality and how a person manages these or doesn't manage these and how they interface with each other. It all plays this huge part in how the rest of the world feels about you and how you do in life and what kind of relationships you have. And also whether or not you're able to grow and learn, because if you're not looking at yourself accurately, you're never going to grow and learn.
Exactly. The challenge with ego is the message that makes us feel good is often the message that doesn't give us the information we need.
Yeah.
And the message, it's like that Mike Tyson, everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the face.
Mm-hmm.
That face punch is that's the information you need.
Yeah.
Like, my plan sucked. I just got punched in the face. But what's weird about life is you can build a life where you get a lot of positive feedback and you're not getting the negative feedback. You can build that life for yourself. It's just a very small life because you have to put these walls around you so no one can get in there and say you're an idiot. And
the problem is that like hard moments are the ones you grow from. Like difficult moments to accept, like losses, like big losses. Those are where you grow the most, because when you do fail or you do make mistakes, it forces you to really take an accurate account of who you are and what happened and why you had this colossal failure. And that's how you grow.
Yes. But it's hard for people to, lots of people fail and don't make the connection with themselves.
Right. They blame other people.
They blame everyone else.
Very dangerous.
So sometimes it's harder to do that than it sounds. And the other thing is, we don't set up the world where people fail all the time.
Right.
Like you go to school, you just don't fail all the time anymore.
Well, that's the danger in not failing, right? Like with kids, when kids get participation trophies for, we're not going to keep score. I remember my daughter had a soccer game when she was 3, and they were like, we're not going to keep score. I'm like, why wouldn't you keep score? Because, well, when the other kids score, then these kids feel bad. Yeah. Well, it's good that, first of all, they learn you're going to be okay if someone scores on you. Yeah. And you get past that feeling bad. You go, you know what? I like it when I kick that ball into the net. How do I get better at kicking that ball into the net? Because if it doesn't matter, then you never develop this ability to do difficult things and get better at them.
Right. And competition is fun because it matters.
Yeah.
If it doesn't matter, it's no fun. It matters.
When someone kicks that ball past you and it goes to the net, you're like, shit. And everybody goes, yes. And you're like, ugh.
but you want to do sports. It's like, you do baseball, you strike out, 2/3 of the time you miss or something. Like you fail all the time in baseball. Soccer is low scoring. You go into athletics, you got to lose all the time. That's just part of it. And if you're not able to lose, you can never get better.
Right.
So But
we protect children from it. It's very strange. And this is not something that happened when I was a child or when you were a child. It's fairly recent that they started protecting children from the feeling of losses.
Yeah, it's that whole the safetyism, all these different cultural changes, and
helicopter parenting.
I'm a big believer in natural consequences. That's something I think is good for kids. And natural consequences is the term we use. Like if you grab the stove and you get burned, you just go, I'm not doing that again. Like I don't need to tell my kid like, you shouldn't have done that, you idiot. Like I got the memo.
Right.
And so things like, I grew up, surfing. You go up there and ocean didn't care about you. You go out there and you know what you're doing. It's great. You don't. It just crushes you. Yeah. And your ego, you just can't have an ego. And that's why big wave surfers are always kind of chill.
Yeah, I always felt that way about ocean towns as well. There's something about being connected to something that's so big. Any idea that you're really important kind of goes away when you look at the ocean. You're like, wow, look at that.
Yeah. You're like, well, if I start drifting, next step is
fucked.
Japan, and it's very liberating because it's kind of like a little awe experience. Sometimes those big awe experiences can be good for reducing ego. Yeah. And but any of those natural consequences and failing and losing, it kind of sharpens up who you are, and it's very liberating after a while.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I've always told men, in particular, young guys, that jiu-jitsu's great. It's a great medicine for your ego because you're 100% going to lose. There's no doubt about it, unless you're some just super enormous person that just has some freak body. Most people get dominated a lot. Yeah. And when you get beaten a lot, you develop this ability to understand your place in the food chain in terms of that, and you also accept losses better. You realize like you're going to be okay. It's just a game. If you lose at a game of checkers, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, but you lose at a game of jiu-jitsu, it seems very devastating. But once you lose a bunch of times, your ego gets managed better, and it's much healthier for you. You get accustomed to losing. There are many men that don't ever participate in sports or ever participate in anything athletic when they're young, anything competitive. They get to be adults, and they're in this weird stage where they never fully matured. They've never developed this ability to understand the value of healthy competition, because there's a real value to it. It's a game that you learn. It's not protecting yourself from that feeling of loss is actually dangerous for you. It's almost like a person who washes their hands too much and never gets exposed to germs. Like you need to develop an understanding of what it feels like to fail.
Sort of a psychological immune system to
Yes.
failure in that sense. I like that. I mean, I think you're right. I one of my grad students does Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and was telling me about it. And it's like you get choked out all the time, right?
All the time.
It's like, and that's your consequence.
Yep.
Like you just get knocked out.
Well, you luckily you don't get knocked out. You get choked, and the good thing about that is it doesn't give you brain damage like getting hit does.
Okay.
So, and usually you tap out before you get choked out, so you don't get any damage from it. Really, you just get sort of bruised up a little bit. But the benefit of it is you're doing it constantly, and jiu-jitsu people in general are some of the nicest, friendliest people, the easiest to get along with, because they have control of their ego. They understand their ego better.
I was going to ask you that. So how is ego, does it get wiped out in the martial arts over time? It
Totally
doesn't always,
get
right?
wiped out, especially with dominators, especially with people that are like conquerors who wind up winning championships and stuff like that. A lot of them have very, very, very strong egos, sometimes overwhelmingly so. And some of those guys, what's really interesting is when they lose, especially if they lose badly, boy, it changes their whole life. Like they never become the same again. Some men are
back from
yeah,
it.
because like physically maybe they're the same, but psychologically they're so damaged from having that ego death that they really never recover from it, because a lot of their reason for success is they felt like they're the man. I'm the fucking man. And when someone comes along and says, no, I'm the man, you're like, oh shit,
Yeah.
he's the man. And then you're intimidated, and then you don't realize like, okay, this is like mathematics. These are equations. There's all sorts of things going on. You fell short in a number of areas. You must look at it like you're looking at a problem. You have to look at it like you're looking at some sort of a mathematical equation. What went wrong? Well, I was lacking conditioning. I was lacking the understanding of these certain positions where I got caught in traps. I didn't know the defense. I need to add all those things to my repertoire. And then I also have to work on my psychology. I have to work on my mind, because when I did get into a situation where I was vulnerable, I started to panic, and then it diminished my ability to think well under stress. Because being able to think well under stress is also a huge factor. But instead of thinking of it in terms of like, you're a person, he's a person, that person beat you, like think of it in terms of like math. Like think of all these different factors that are at play, and where were you lacking, and what was wrong with your approach. And then it gives you this terrible loss, gives you a terrible feeling, but it's also a terrible feeling, but it's an amazing opportunity to grow. And all my biggest growth moments in my life have come from colossal failures.
So what changes somebody in a fight from looking at it from an ego to, I'm going to break this down. It's really not me and you. We're not competitors. It's just these numbers moving around, and I got to figure out where my weaknesses are. And, you know, like Bruce Lee, like my kick and this, and break down can some people do that? Can everyone do that? Do you need a coach?
Some people are special.
Do you get a coach that comes in and kind of looks at tapes with you or something?
Sure. Yeah, a lot of guys do that. A lot of guys look at tapes by themselves. A lot of guys look at tapes with coaches. You know, Mike Tyson famously had one of his managers was a historian of boxing. So Mike Tyson would watch old films of like the great Jack Johnson and Jack Dempsey and like Harry Greb and all these old school boxers, and he'd look at their movements, and he would adopt some of their attacks and defense. And there's definitely benefit to watching yourself and seeing where you screw up, but there's also benefit to having a mental coach. Mike Tyson also had Cus D'Amato, who was his longtime boxing coach, who adopted him when he was 13, was also a hypnotist, and worked with him on the mental aspect of his game, and would literally say to him, "You do not exist. Only the task exists. The task of breaking this man down." And this was imparted in him when he was a small boy. He was 13 years old. And also what was imparted was that when he did do this thing, he experienced love and appreciation and adulation at a level that he never had in his life. So his life, he was at this great deficit of love. He didn't have a lot of love in his family. He lived in a terrible neighborhood. There was no one there for him. So then all of a sudden there's this man who just happens to be one of the greatest boxing coaches of all time, who takes him in, who's also a hypnotist, who's also a master of psychology in regards to combat sports. And he trains this young man to be one of the greatest of all time. And of course the results are unbelievable. But you have a perfect storm of things happening too, because he's also incredibly physically gifted. So he has incredible speed and power, which speed and power are two things where you really can't do much about power. Like if you're a person who has small bones and you don't hit very hard, it's not in the cards for you. So he had all these things going for him, that he had power at a young age, but a lot of it was like having someone who understood how to mold him psychologically. And a person like that, ego is very important. He would talk about it. There's a great documentary that Tyson talks about his walk into the ring, and how in the beginning he's nervous, he's unsure of himself, but by the time he gets into the ring, he's a god. And his ego, he used that ego
strategically.
It fueled him. Yeah.
That's cool.
It is interesting but it can also create massive problems for you, as it did for him outside of the ring.
Well, it sounds, I don't know him or any of these people, but it almost sounds like he's been somewhat exploited at that age, and turning his psyche into a structure to make him a bit of a weapon, and probably benefiting other people. I don't know.
A little bit of benefiting other people, but also greatly benefiting himself.
Oh, yeah.
He became one of the greatest heavyweight boxers the world has ever known. So there's pros and cons there, but my point was that there is something to the ego in that regard, where I think you almost have to have it to be Michael Jordan, right? For instance, who had a tremendous ego.
Huge.
Yeah. But also one of the greatest, if not the greatest basketball player of all time. But obsessed. Did you ever see the video? Jamie actually played it for me once. There was a video where this guy was talking shit about Michael Jordan after he retired. And so Michael Jordan came back and played him one-on-one and just scorched him while he's talking shit the whole time. Who was that, Jamie? Did you play me that?
No. It's happened multiple times, though. In the documentary, they go over 5 or 6 different situations where he's going back over someone that slighted him in the tiniest way, and just wreaked havoc on him. 40 points on him.
Yeah.
Called him you would act like they don't exist. All sorts of funny stuff.
Yeah, his ego was substantial, and is, I'm sure. But also the results are substantial.
Right. And so the question that I wonder, and this is really a question because I don't get to study high performance athletes with narcissism work. You don't get to do it. You can get data from presidents and stuff that you can get from historians, but you just don't really have the data. And I wonder, obviously from Muhammad Ali and stuff, and that sort of braggadocio before fights, that if in those combat sports, ego is super important to develop. Theoretically, it makes sense. One-on-one competition. Yeah. It's not about a team. You just have to win.
Up to a point, I would say. Well, what I was saying before was that the people that get destroyed, who have these enormous egos, when they get exposed, it takes incredible character to build yourself back up. And some never do. Some get psychologically defeated and they're never the same again. Because the pain of loss and the pain of being exposed as being inferior to your opponent is just too much. But I wonder, that's such a rare example of when it would be beneficial to be narcissistic or beneficial to have an ego, tremendous ego.
if you look across the literature, the place it seems to work is individual competitiveness. Because if you're in a team, so imagine, you see this in teams all the time. So the old story is the quarterback goes in front of the cameras and goes, yeah, I won it for the team. And the next time the front line just lets the defense through and the quarterback's dead. Mm-hmm. So he goes, next time he wins, he goes, yeah, I just want to thank my team and God. And then the team supports him. Because in a team sport, you can't be really successful without a team. Maybe basketball a little bit, but like football and stuff. So it keeps that ego in check. But with boxing or fight, it's just you.
It is, but it also is a team as well, because you need a coach. You need someone to train you correctly. And in Tyson's case, when his coach died, when Customato died, and then his relationship with his coaches afterwards deteriorated to the point where he really was just having like bucket carriers in the ring with him. His career faded.
So you need a back office kind of.
You need
a
someone
whole
you
team.
respect too. You need someone who's like, hey man, you keep dropping your fucking left hand. Stop doing that. You're like, okay, thank you. Like you need someone who sees your failures and your mistakes and checks you on them, and you need to respect that person.
So does Michael Jordan have that person?
I think Michael Jordan was so hard on himself and so obsessed with winning. I mean, I think this is why I wanted to bring him up, because I think there's psychological issues that these extreme winners have that you don't get to where they are without them. It's like where the illness becomes beneficial, right?
Yeah.
If you're not sadistic, you don't make a good serial killer.
Right. Or a good internet troll. Yeah.
But if you're not narcissistic or an egomaniac, I wonder if you ever become a guy like Michael Jordan, who's just so dominant.
Well, he's an example of somebody who's very egotistical. I mean, I don't know him, but that's what people say. He's very competitive, and it's obviously worked for him. And you see it with all. So the other option might be that, well, if you're kind of a dick and you're really, really good, people will let you get away with it.
What are you gonna say?
That for Kobe Bryant, they call it the Mamba mentality. Like he's known for having this mentality where winning at all costs. If you're not with me, fuck you.
Right.
I'm gonna win.
Yeah. And also one of the greatest of all time.
Yeah.
Sure, 100%.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, and it can wreak havoc on your personal life because other people feel left out or maligned or not appreciated.
Well, I know with Kobe, he got back with his family and was trying to, make that work, and was a pretty committed dad.
Yeah, he made a correction. He adjusted. Yeah, which is also when you achieve a failure in your personal life. A person who is so dedicated to success, the only way he got that good is when he encountered mistakes or failures he corrected. So obviously he made that same adjustment in his personal life as well.
Right.
He must have felt, especially the public issues that he had.
Yeah.
He must have felt that they were tremendous failures, and then he had to make corrections.
So what you said there is really interesting, because that's the question. So do you look at that and go, that's a public failure about my marriage?
Yeah.
And is the solution to that about me winning by having the winning marriage? Or do you say, God, it's a public fail about my marriage. I need to be a more loving person and just get connected to my family more as an emotional person?
Yeah, I think that answer is dependent. I mean, how you answer that question, I should say, is really dependent upon what's your priority.
Right.
Like, is your priority you, or is your priority you and the people you love? Like, can you work that into the equation?
Right.
Or is it just, fuck her, I'll get a new wife, who doesn't know me that good?
Yeah. No, I mean, but that's
Some people do that.
No, with narcissism, that's what I said. Like, well, you just got a new wife. How can someone do that? I'm like, well, they got a new car. It's the same thing.
Well, a lot of famous celebrity type people wind up doing that, the exact thing, right?
I said my doctoral dissertation was on narcissism and romantic attraction, and it was kind of inspired by Trump, because he always had these beautiful. Oh yeah, it was great. He always had these beautiful wives,
Yeah.
And I mean, that was back in the day, and he seems like he's settled down now. But I mean, that was just a thing people did. Trophy spouse.
Well, it seems like to be that guy who has your name on the buildings and has your name on the jet, and you kind of have to have a super hot wife.
it's kind of part of the package, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of brand.
Seems like it has to be.
Yeah. Sort of the brand thing. But
Well, it's also a narcissism thing because you want everyone to see all this great stuff that you have. So you want everybody to see this beautiful lady that's beside you.
totally.
And see your name on the building. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it kind of works, and why not do it? But the problem is that the other 3 wives before that one maybe aren't as happy about it. And
Yeah, but they should. It is part of it. It's like that's what it is. That's who he is. That's what the game is.
Kind of sign
and that's
up
the
for
game
it.
with many of these like high profile businessmen. The game is, get a hot wife, buy a jet, maybe an island, keep moving, always show everybody that you have the nicest things, step out of the Bugatti, all that stuff.
Yeah. But that's kind of the classic grandiose narcissism pattern. And the reason, and that's life strategy is a successful strategy for a lot of people. I mean, you get status and fame and some money. I mean, you lose a lot of money in those alimony payments. It's not it's not
clean.
It's not clean, but it works for a lot of people, but it's a very demanding lifestyle.
But it's also what we talked about earlier, like what is success? Like there's many people that live in a log cabin and that have a real simple life, but they're real happy. And then there's people that have, a penthouse in Manhattan and they take a helicopter to the airport to fly their private jet to Paris and they're fucking miserable and they're on antidepressants and they're taking pills and they, they're constantly in stress.
Yeah, if you try to get that, so the problem with trying to get status, I mean, trying to be happy because you're cooler than other people, like you have higher social status, it's impossible to win because there's always somebody better than you.
Yep.
And if there isn't now, there will be in 5 years, or in 5 years, no one's going to give a rat's ass what you did in the first place because they think they're like, football is for losers. We got rid of football. Only idiots played football.
Yeah. I wonder, like, when a guy like Jeff Bezos gets to $200 billion, like, does he just enjoy working? Maybe he does. Maybe he enjoys the game of working.
At that point, it's not for money because you couldn't spend it. I mean, it would be money as a counter, maybe, as like a marker, but it wouldn't be like, oh, I can go buy another Bugatti. I mean, you could buy them all. You could go buy the Bugatti company.
You could buy the Bugatti company and not even notice it. Yeah,
you wouldn't even notice it. It would just be eaten up in the next stock bump.
Yeah.
You'd be curious to talk to. But then he went and got the new wife.
He's got a girlfriend.
The girlfriend.
Didn't marry her,
Didn't
but
marry her.
she's done that kind of hopping around thing.
I haven't kept up with
a bunch of high-profile fellas.
Good.
Yeah.
Good.
So she's got her own little thing going on.
Everyone's happy, and I don't know.
I hope he's happy.
Yeah.
But it's curious. It's like, I mean, it's one thing if it's someone who's like maybe a writer and they like J.K. Rowling, who's worth like $1 billion, right, or more, and she's obviously still writing. She loves writing.
Yeah.
It's not like she made that money just doing business, doing things she doesn't enjoy doing.
Yeah.
She made that money as a consequence of her art. It makes sense to me that she keeps writing. But I've always wondered with guys like that are businessmen, do you enjoy the business aspect of it? Do you enjoy, is there something about showing up at the office and banging out 12 hours a day that's exciting to you?
People I know who do it kind of like it.
Yeah.
It seems people I know in business, they think it's cool. They go in there. It's a game. They got an office. They got a team. They're crushing it.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds like fun. Fucking crushing it.
Yeah. It's a game.
Yeah.
And then social media, this is, we kind of touched on it briefly, but it seems to me that if there's anything in this world that feeds narcissism, it would be Instagram.
It is. I mean, so social media, so when I first heard about Facebook, it's probably been 10, 15, 12 years, whenever it came out. And I went to one of my students, Laura, and I was like, this is crazy. We got to study this. Study narcissism at Facebook. This is crazy.
So 12 years ago, you thought this?
Yeah. I mean, at first, I'm like, this is bigger than Woodstock.
2007, 2008.
I think the paper is like 2007 or 8. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we looked at narcissism and we were like, wow, God, the people who are narcissistic have more friends on Facebook. They spend more time on their picture. They get more glamour shots. You kind of see these, that people are using social media to kind of put out an image of themselves and get followers. And people have been looking at it since. And with narcissism, you see people who are narcissistic are just more dialed into social media. They have more followers, more friends, more connections. send more selfies. The kind of thing is just dialed in for narcissism.
Right.
And narcissism is the energy. It's one of the energies, one of the big energies that keeps those systems working.
Mm-hmm.
And Instagram, people haven't really done a lot of comparison social media work, like is narcissism higher on Instagram than Twitter versus TikTok? Because these things they change culturally, and we don't have that much money to do research. But when I look at them, Instagram seems like the one that's kind of dialed in for narcissism, particularly because it's photographic. It's it's very good for status seeking.
It's also the easiest to lie because you have filters.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and then people pose in front of cars that maybe they rented or aren't theirs, or
I find the whole thing hilarious.
Weird.
Yeah, you get a hype house. I mean, I guess
Hype
that's more
house, is what they call it?
That's it in YouTube. That's what they call it. My students who study YouTube. They get a hype house down in Malibu. You rent a house on the beach with 10 people and live the dream, take a bunch of photos.
well, there's money in it. That's what's
Yeah.
crazy. It's like if we're going by the metric that we used earlier to define success,
Success.
like what is success? Is it financial success? Because I was reading an article today. We were actually talking about this last night with Tim when we went to dinner, and we were talking about Boa, which is this big steakhouse in Hollywood that's filled with TikTok stars now. Believe it or not, this is one of the biggest steakhouses in Hollywood, and it's like a known place where TikTok stars go, and they people take pictures of them, but these TikTok stars, you would go, well, this is stupid. Well, is it? Because they're making millions of dollars.
They're eating Boa. I'm not.
So if they were making if you are not making millions of dollars, and you're like, look, I'm an accountant, I'm a serious person, and I make $300,000 a year, and I go, well, you're doing very well, but this TikTok star made $300,000 a month, and no one understands why or how, but they're doing it. Is that dumb? And it is part of what they're doing is hype houses and showing pretty watches and showing gold earrings and diamonds and nice cars and all that shit. Like, it seems like it's like a financial strategy that's very beneficial, but it's also based on bullshit and ego. What is this? TikTok and Instagram influencers exposed for renting fake private jet set. Oh, there's a set.
Oh, that's cool.
Oh my God.
See, I won't even.
Set. There's a set.
That's nice.
Oh, that is hilarious. Oh my God, that is hilarious. They have a fake private jet set. Wow. How weird. Wow. Hold on. Let me see that post. What does it say? It says, I just found out LA girl is using studio sets that look like private jets for Instagram pics. It's crazy that anything you're looking at could be fake. The setting, the clones, the body. I don't know. It just sort of shakes my reality a bit. LOL. Well, I'm not shocked, but I am. I am
too.
I am, and I'm not. It's weird, but that thing of bawling out of control, like showing everybody.
The first time I figured, first time this stuff clicked was I was teaching a class, like a seminar, and the students, they're never paying attention. They're looking at their phones. I'm, what are you watching during class? And they're watching Khloe Kardashian or Kylie Jenner, like driving a Ferrari in LA, like over a curb. I'm like, oh, it just hurt to watch because I'm like, why are you this beautiful car? And I'm like, but they're just watching her. And I'm like, oh my God, this woman is a genius. She figured this out. Like, she was directly beaming TV right to my students, and she disintermediated the studios and the writers and the scripts. And she's like, I'm just driving my freaking
Well, it's
Ferrari.
amazing.
It's incredible.
What catches people's eyes and what makes something viral. Like Jamie and I were looking at this video yesterday, this dude who is on a skateboard drinking cranberry juice, singing along to Fleetwood Mac.
I saw that video.
Yes.
Oh my God, I love that guy. It's like
There's something about him.
don't know who that-
He's singing along, and it's compelling for whatever reason. It's compelling.
Maybe when the world is this bad, just a guy just living his best life on a
Yeah.
skateboard is just the hero we need.
Maybe because it's all so the way he's doing it. Like there's no showing off there. He's just got cranberry juice, drinking right out of the bottle, rolling around on skateboards, not wearing anything fancy.
Just kind of stoked.
Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, he's living the dream. He looks maybe maybe he's
Meet
maybe
Nathan Apodica, the man behind that Fleetwood Mac skateboarding TikTok video. Wow.
I love it. Yeah, he's
So his
dog-faced
he's got a Twitter
208.
too. Yeah, that's him. See, like when you watch this guy rolling, like look, he's just wearing a sweatshirt. There's nothing crazy about it.
So going back to
Drinking cranberry juice. He's a father from Wyoming, just having a good time. It's really fun.
because he's stoked.
Yeah.
I mean, he's passionate,
Right.
and you're like, this guy's awesome.
Well, he's really having fun. When someone's being genuine, when someone's really having fun, for whatever reason, that resonates with us.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be some chick on a fake jet set pretending, here I am with my pouty lips. No, it's just a regular dude. He's a regular dude on a skateboard.
Yeah.
With a head. He's got a head tattoo. He's got like leaves tattooed on the side of his
kind
head.
The peach feathers in the
Yeah,
back.
something. But he's having fun. He's like clearly having a good time. Like this, we recognize authenticity, right? And we see it in that guy. That it's a real smile. He really is singing along to those songs.
Yeah, but authenticity. Well, it's an interesting thing because how do you find it? Because it's a bit like lightning in a bottle, finding
Yeah.
that. And then if you brought him into set and say, "Do your thing," you'd
Right,
be authentic.
then it wouldn't
He's
be
like,
authentic.
It's hard to do.
That's one of the brilliant things about social media is that there's no other people involved, so you get a chance to see these moments. Like I was trying to explain this to a friend of mine who is a producer. He produces television shows and a bunch of different things, and we're talking about doing. He's getting into the podcast world, but he's talking about doing podcasts, and he's talking about why is it that podcasts they have this resonance. There's something they resonate with people in a way that like a talk show on television doesn't. And one of the things that I was saying is like because there's too many people on these television shows. There's too many people staring. There's too many unnatural aspects of it. Like this is really natural, right?
Yeah.
You and me are just sitting at a desk. There's a lot of people watching and listening, but it just happens to be that way.
Yeah, I'm not
There's
thinking
no
about that.
right. There's no one here.
Yeah.
Here is just you and me sitting at a desk. If there was no one else paying any attention, there was no cameras. The only thing weird is the headphones.
Right.
And honestly, this is the best way to have a conversation because I hear you the same level that I hear me, so it keeps me from talking over you. And we're locked into each other, so we don't hear any extraneous noise. Obviously, this is a soundproof room,
Right.
so we don't hear anything outside anyway. But that's why it works. The reason why it works is because it's just happening, right? There's no cut.
Yeah.
Keith, I liked what you said
Yeah,
there.
can we try
but
that again?
Do you think you maybe are too happy that Donald Trump's doing well? I mean, in this day and age, I'm a little uncomfortable. So let's try it again. But this time, what I want you to do is just say, just like a little disdain. We have a little disdain, right? We have a little. We're both
I can
good
do
people
that.
here.
Just a little sneer.
And then okay, try it again.
Yeah.
And so that's how.
I've done those shoots so many times.
I bet you have, right? If you're doing a documentary in particular, right? Or being questioned or interviewed about stuff, something you want to use in a thing. Those moments are hard, like authentic moments are hard to achieve, And in authentic moments, right, especially when you're doing it over a long period of time like a podcast, you're going to have some hiccups and clunky moments. But those hiccups reassure people that, oh, this is like, he's just a person. This is like just like me. And he is just thinking about this and real. And, and if you're in the middle of something, you're, no, actually, maybe I might be wrong here. And then you see people see you rethink things in real time. It makes sense. You don't ever see that on one of those highly produced television shows. They would cut out the rethink thing.
Yeah.
And they'd go, Keith, let's try it again. Now that you've rethought it, can you just say it one more time?
Make it all slick.
Yeah, make it all slick.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what that makes me think of is, this is going to sound way off topic, but I went to a business where they were building virtual reality systems to treat PTSD in troops. So you put on virtual reality glasses and you go back to like virtual Iraq or virtual Afghanistan, and it's supposed to bring you back to those feelings. And I thought, well, I'll try them, see what it's like. Never been there, but the way they did it is they'd show you in a room with a bunch of guys throwing cigarettes around, playing cards, talking, but no drama, no narrative. It was just kind of random stuff. And they said the reason that worked, it seems so much more real than movies or television, is that movies, everything feeds into the narrative. So there's no kind of extraneous stuff. It's all narrative based. So we watch it a certain way, but when it doesn't, when there's things that don't feed in the narrative, they're just kind of random, people get more engaged in it. It seems more real. Sort of like in Pulp Fiction where they have those random conversations about cheeseburgers. You know, like, that's the best part of the movie. It has nothing to do with the plot. So it's just kind of random stuff, but it brings people in because it makes it seem real.
Yeah, it gives you this feeling like you don't know what to expect because weird stuff is happening that you didn't expect.
Right, in the moment.
Right. Like if you watch one of those Law and Order shows or something like that, one of those real predictable television shows, no disrespect to Law and Order, but there's some cookie cutter shows where you kind of see it coming along and it's in some ways for some people it's satisfying to see the bad guy get caught at the end, or maybe there's a little bit of a plot twist that you didn't see, and that's a nice surprise. But for the most part, you kind of know what's happening.
Yeah, it's procedural.
But you see a movie like No Country for Old Men where the bad guy gets away at the end, and you're like, what the fuck? And you walk out of there going, did I even like that? Like, I did. I loved it, but I was like disturbed.
Who's that? That guy still freaks me out.
That guy's awesome.
Oh my God.
What is his name again, Jamie?
Such a great role.
The guy with the terrible hair?
Yeah,
that guy is
that scared me.
He's fucking fantastic.
Yeah, I don't get haunted by a lot. That's that one movie. I'm like, I don't want to watch this one again.
I believe that actor could do that to people.
Yeah, it's like I don't think this is real. Like you just stick with the cows. You just go away.
Yeah, there's something about him, man. He's got that. There's people that have that thing, right, where they can embody whatever it is, whether it's a psychopath or whether it's a Bardem. Yeah, Javier Bardem. That guy. Give me a picture of Javier. So just get a look at him.
Yeah,
that motherfucker scares me.
Yes.
Give me that one right there. Yeah, right there where your cursor's at. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But you don't want that guy in your kitchen.
Just scary.
Mad at you. He was just amazing.
But he doesn't come across as just kind of all out evil. It just seems much more like normal. Like normal evil.
Explosive. That's what he seems to me. Like like anything can happen at any moment, and you're like nervous that he's gonna just kill you.
Yeah. It's like,
yeah.
What would you like to eat? And you're like, why did I say tuna fish?
Those are the scary people, the ones that can just go at any moment.
Yeah. That gave me the creeps. That movie.
Great movie.
Yeah. That's a great movie.
Yeah, but the difference is, right, like there's things happening in that film that like keep you on edge. You never get comfortable.
Yeah.
You never feel like, I understand what this movie is. No, you never get comfortable. And that's the case with Pulp Fiction as well. And a lot of Tarantino's movies do that. He's very good at that, like keeping you like guessing, like where the fuck is he going with this?
And you can't really foreclose on. Another movie, happy ending, boom. I'm gonna go get a taco.
No.
You know, you're still. I'm thinking about that guy.
Well, the way the mind works is so interesting, and the way the mind interfaces with other people. The way there's certain people that for whatever reason they just bring out the worst in some folks, right?
Absolutely, but in different ways.
Yeah.
You know, some people make people angry. Some people just kind of destabilize things. Some people cause drama. People do different things.
But people also, some people make you feel like some people legitimately can make you a better person. Because when you're around them, you want to do better. You want to be better, and you can.
Yes.
My point was that the opposite is true too. Like. And this is where the nature versus nurture when it comes to narcissism or any other ego problems. I always wonder, like, if you're in a bad environment, like, how much does that shape you as a human being? Like, how much does that change who you are? If you're around the wrong kind of people, how many people are out there that are constantly around bad people and they go, you know what? That's how you get ahead in this world. You got to be an asshole. And so I'm going to be an asshole too.
So I think you're totally right. I mean, the one idea, sometimes there's this idea we talk about the Michelangelo phenomenon, really, that you kind of get in relationships with people that are really good for you and they bring out the best part of you.
Right.
You know, somebody, you're like, they see you for the best part. They see, they see Keith and they see the best part of Keith and they make me a better person.
And you want to be better.
And I want to be a better person. Yeah. And the Keith they see is a lot better than the Keith I see. And that makes me better. Other people, don't do that. They're bringing you down. They're giving you the wrong message, and you can either imitate them and fail, or when you're trying to succeed, they just pull you down and say, "Do what I'm doing."
And sometimes it's little things. Like sometimes it's little people, just like little criticisms that people will do when you're talking to them that like keeps you from being comfortable. Yeah, just little jabs,
nice
not
jabs.
that big a deal. And they're like, God, why are you so sensitive? Like, oh, okay. Am I that sensitive? Because you're just fucking annoying to be around, and I got to get away from you. And those little tiny things. I remember I had a girlfriend once that was really negative, like really negative. Everything was, could just complained about everything. And then I moved to California, and I met this girl who was really nice. And I remember thinking the difference, the way I felt around her was like, now I'm having fun. Yeah. Like, oh, we could just have laughs together. Like you could have, like, you don't have to be around someone that's always wearing you down. But if you are, it changes who you are too, because your reality, like, is you're interfacing with this negativity all the time, and it can shape your personality. It can shape how you interface with the world.
Oh, completely. I mean, that happens all the time. You get in this. I mean, goes back in the old self-research. Like, how do you raise your self-esteem? Well, get around people who like you.
That helps a lot.
Yeah, because a lot of times your self-esteem is determined by the people around you, and people that are anxious all the time bringing you down. Because if you get success, like you're saying, that you get successful, they look bad, so they're always jabbing you, or they're insecure or whatever. That's bad. The other thing is trauma, just those trauma in life screws people up. It just doesn't seem to be very specific. So you get a lot of young childhood traumas. That can lead to narcissism. It can lead to other things as well. It doesn't seem to be specific, but it makes your personality a little more rigid and maybe a little more fragile. So it's not a good thing, but it's not really specific in what kind of bad thing it is.
Trauma also creates personality in some people. Like some people, trauma shapes their personality. The recovery from trauma builds character. And some of the most interesting people that I know had traumatic upbringings.
Yeah, and there's this really interesting idea they talk about as post-traumatic growth. So what's weird about life is we can have, like, when trauma happens, it can lead to really negative things and really positive things both simultaneously. And some of those negative things would be, PTSD or stressors or, anxiety or whatever, difficult relaxing, kind of being wound up all the time. But the positive things are the trauma can give you a motivation to grow and go seek new things. And kind of the classic book on this was Somerset Maugham's The Razor's Edge. That Bill Murray made a movie of this. It was a while ago. But it's about a guy in World War I who was traumatized in the war and then went out and ended up going to India and sort of seeking some religion. But people who are traumatized, you're suffering and you need to seek a way out. And sometimes that path to growth can lead you to a better place than you would have been if you'd never suffered in the first place.
Right. Yeah.
And that's what's powerful about trauma. It's what's powerful about suffering.
When we're talking about narcissism, there's an idea that I have had, and I think a lot of people have when it comes to narcissists, is that they're not redeemable.
Yeah, and I don't like that idea anymore. And it's because it was very common. It was what I thought when I started studying narcissism.
Is it because it's just so difficult to redeem, like alcoholics or
there's a couple things.
Addicts
One is we thought personality was pretty fixed. So we thought all personality, Freud thought it was fixed in the first 6-7 years, and maybe, James thought maybe the first 15 or 18 years, but maybe 30. But we thought people's personality got fixed when they were young, and then when they just sort of stayed the same way. And that doesn't seem to be the case. People do seem to be able to change. And then the other thing with narcissism is that when people want to change, somebody's depressed or anxious, it's hard. You go to therapy, you do a lot of work, you spend time, it's hard to do, but people can do it. People who are narcissistic often don't have the motivation to change. They have some motivation to change. Their marriage sucks or their work has fallen apart, but they feel pretty good about themselves. So there's a real high dropout rate in therapy. So whenever you look at narcissism in therapy, you find a huge problem of people staying in it. But if you can get people to go in it and stay in it, it looks like people can change, that it isn't over.
What do they do? Like, say if a Donald Trump type person or someone who was pretty obviously narcissistic there's a therapist, how do they address that?
Well, there's there's no gold standard for therapy for narcissism because there's never been a randomized clinical trial on, sort of narcissistic therapies.
How would you conduct one of those?
Get 100 people who are narcissistic and put 50 in one condition and 50 in the other. Well, you need more, but 100 in one condition.
It seems like there's so many other aspects of their life that are constantly in flux.
It's hard to find that many people,
Right.
and it's just very hard to find. So we just don't have that kind of data.
Right.
We do for other disorders, depression and sometimes maybe borderline personality disorder, where you get a lot of people hospitalized for it. We have some. So I can't say this is what works. Science is proven. It doesn't. What seems to happen is there are different therapies. They range from the classic, more psychodynamic therapies. If you were in New York and were narcissistic, you might see somebody and they'd talk about your childhood a little bit. So they talk about what's going on now. They'd probably link it to your childhood and some trauma or issues you had in childhood and try to kind of rebuild that narrative about your life. And it would be a longer process and it would be a little more self-reflective. So that's one of the more psychodynamic therapy. A cognitive behavioral therapy, which is pretty common. You could do it around here anywhere. They'd say, let's look at the specific behavioral patterns that are messing you up, the certain patterns of thinking, and let's figure those out. This is what happens. Every time I go home, I want praise. It just doesn't happen. My wife's like, where have you been all day? Or, why don't I grab something? Why don't I get a parade when I get home?
Right.
Like, Joe, let's just unpack that thought a little bit. Do you really think, what's your wife been doing? Oh, I don't know, just eating bonbons. Let's really think about that. Do you really think that's what she's been doing? Who do you think picked up the kids? Well, I guess my wife did. Well, that's something. Maybe she's tired too. And you're like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't get a parade when I get home. Maybe,
right.
So you kind of restructure a little bit.
Which I think generally we're cynical when we think about people who are narcissistic or have huge egos adjusting and changing. We're cynical. We think, they experience some negative feedback, so they're pretending to be different because people are mad at them. Right.
But we've done that. I mean, we've done the research. We grad students, this is Chelsea Sleeper, did this big study, but we studied a huge number of people who are narcissistic and said, do you have problems being antagonistic? Does your antagonism, your callousness, your lack of empathy, does that cause you problems? They're like, yeah, it does. And they see it more than other people, at least sometimes. So it's different than what I thought. What I thought was you had people that don't really see that they're running over everybody. But when we ask people, it seems like they're aware. There's some awareness that, my ego is kind of screwing up some of these things. I might not want to change it. Might not be worth fixing it because I'm more important than you. But it might be something, I see there's a problem. And if I could change it easily, I probably would. So people aren't people who are narcissistic they're not sadists. They're not going out there. It's not like I want to be mean to people. It's like I want to be loved. I want to be admired, worshipped. I don't want to put a lot of energy into anyone else, but I'm not necessarily trying to be mean all the time.
I wonder if many of them have sort of just developed a pattern, and this pattern has served them to a certain extent. And this pattern involves their perceptions of the outside world, their perceptions of themselves, and then these things that they tell themselves and this way of looking at themselves that you would clearly define as narcissistic, but they almost look at it like a tool. And this is sort of, even though it's a crude tool, it's allowed them to navigate the waters successfully.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, we use the term self-regulation for this. It's sort of how, if you're trying to pilot your life, yourself through the world, and how do you get ahead, and what kind of self do you want to be? Do you want to be sort of a promotional and confident and brash, or do you want to be quiet and a good friend? Do you want to be studious? How do you want to make yourself work? And if you find, everybody's like, well, all the jerks get the girls, well, I'm going to be kind of an arrogant jerk. And you get a couple early successes and you start coming up with this strategy for life. It might work for you for a while, but then it's going to stop work. I mean, that's what happens in life.
Well, it'll probably stop when you reach a self-aware woman that you actually really like. It's
right?
Like, no,
then you go, I want
you're
to get
an
married.
asshole. You're like, shit.
Right. I mean,
It's worked on all these dummies.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not, I don't want to get into like a pot calling the kettle black situation, but I understand that transition, where people are like, maybe it's time for I make a change. Maybe I want to get married.
Well,
maybe
there's
I want to
also
settle
a
down.
thing is that we see it in other people that are doing well, and we kind of imitate successful behavior. And some of that successful behavior is people being assholes.
Yes.
And you think like maybe I have to be an asshole to get ahead. Like you've ever seen any of those pickup artists?
A little bit.
Yeah, there's some of these guys have like come up with these courses that they teach men how to, and a lot of them involve treating women like shit.
Yeah, nagging.
Well, They treat them in a way that make the women not feel in control of the situation, or they make them slightly insecure. And there's like strategies on how to do that. Yeah,
no, I mean, this is something you see with narcissism in general in relationships. So one of these strategies is, there's a few different ones, just game playing. So what you can do with people is you can say, I'm really committed. Oh, wait, I'm not committed. So in a relationship, there's this, what happens in a relationship is the person who's most committed has the least power. So if I'm dating someone and I love them a lot and she doesn't love me that much, and I say, what do you want to do tonight? And she goes, I want to go to the new, I don't even know what they do anymore because you can't leave your house, but the new romantic comedy at the theater. I'm like, sure, I'll go. I love you. I'll do whatever you want. So because I'm more invested in the relationship, I've got the least power. So people who are narcissistic, then I'm not that invested in a relationship. They get all the relationship power. Because like, I'm going to leave you. Well, so what? I don't care. I'll just go get somebody hotter than you. So there's a thing in relationships where by not committing, you keep power over the other person. You can manipulate. I love you, or do I? And you're game playing in that relationship. You keep power, but what you don't get from that is a committed relationship. You get somebody you're controlling, and eventually that person's going to say, "I'm out of this. This is bullshit."
Yeah, and you get a certain level of resentment too.
Absolutely.
But some people, they've been played with before, so they feel like that's the only way to win this game. You got to play back. Yeah.
That's the pickup artistry. And the one thing with, if you go back to the narcissism relationships, narcissistic relationships, meaning if I get involved with somebody who's narcissistic, they usually start off kind of exciting and satisfying. So you meet somebody, they're confident, they seem like they got it going on. You're like, this is cool. And so it's really exciting. And then there's this normal part in relationships in our culture where it starts exciting, but then it gets more emotionally warm or caring. You're like, okay, that was fun, but what are we going to do now? Maybe we should, go antiquing together or whatever. I don't know. That's literally from one of these old 70s surveys. So you'd make this transition from more of a kind of a fun, sexualized, energetic relationship to something more committed. And the person who's narcissistic goes, I'm not making that transition. I was pretty stoked just doing what we did.
Right.
I'll go find somebody else and do it again. So the problem with these relationships with people who are narcissistic is they can be really fun, but they're only fun for a few months. And then the problem starts. So
is that a symptom of a narcissistic relationship if they're short term and you just go one to the next to the next to the next?
Yeah, it's kind of that pattern of, so you get short term relationships because people they get sick of your bullshit.
They figure you out.
They figure you out and they find someone else.
The newness is gone.
You're kind of over it and you find somebody else. Or they get you and they go, well, I got a chance to up my game. I can find somebody else. I can find somebody better. So if they find somebody better, they'll just bail on you and find somebody better.
And then there's this weird thing they do. They find someone better and they post pictures with that person on social media to let the other person know.
I don't understand that, Joe.
You don't?
I mean, I understand it. It's just
clear.
it's
1
horrible.
+ 1 is 2. It's right there.
I guess I should say I understand it. That's just mean.
Dude, I see it all the time and I go, woo.
I'm so glad I grew up without social media.
Oh my God, me too.
Nightmare.
Could you imagine? Like breakups were so bad. Like before, like I remember like some of my first breakups when I was like 18 and thinking like, God, I'm so sad. I'm so depressed. Yeah. Imagine if I could look at Instagram and see her on the beach in a bikini kissing some beautiful Brazilian man with a bikini on himself, like exactly standing in front of this perfect water, like shit.
Yeah, you're just in your mom's basement, just
He's got those little grape smugglers on, looking amazing.
I know.
Shit.
I know. They
She's
always
kissing
Brazilian colors, for his thong too.
Oh, yeah,
it's just
yeah.
classic.
Men with thongs.
I know. They scare me.
She found a man with a thong?
Damn it.
So confident. Yeah, I mean, that's what people are going through today, and it makes them also want to play that game back, right? And like, I've had friends break up, and then you go to their each individual pages, and you watch them like torment each other with other photos of other people, and they all seem to want to go on vacation almost immediately. They seem to like want to be in Hawaii
and then post photos.
Yeah, making out with drinks. We're having so much fun.
I got my blue Hawaii, making out with this Brazilian
kisses
dude.
with the little floating hearts, like those little filters. It's weird, the little torture games that people do play with each other.
I haven't studied that. I don't know anyone who has yet. I'm sure they have, but I haven't seen it, and I want to now because it's very interesting.
It's social media, just the comparison thing alone is so devastating to people. You know, Jonathan Haidt's book is fantastic about that. The coddling of the American mind.
Yeah.
It just makes you really be concerned. You know, me in particular, I have 2 young daughters, and I think about it quite a bit, about them dealing with this comparison thing. And it's that, but the thing we're talking about, like the breakup thing, I would imagine that's another level on top of that, because here's someone that you're like massively connected to. You were in love with them.
They rejected you.
And then they rejected you, or something went wrong, and then here they are having the time of their life, and here you are depressed, eating
watching
pizza.
it. Oh, I mean, that social comparison, that fear of missing out is the other one that gets really bad. With like all the friends were at the lake at the party this weekend, and I was home, and it's brutal.
Yeah, it is.
I've seen, the social media, like what we've looked at, looks like what we're seeing are big spikes in depression with a lot of these kids.
Yeah.
And
cutting and self-harm and all those things.
Those are so.
Suicide.
A whole nother, suicide is going up. And my sense with social media, this is sense, it's not like, I don't have a paper on this, but my sense is when it started, it was really easy for people and it was great for narcissism. And then the kids started feeling so much pressure. Like what I say with my daughter on social media is as much exposure as a 1930s movie star. Like you're out there all the time.
That's a good way to look at it. Yeah.
So you get celebrity problems, narcissism, but body dysmorphia. Those you go to the plastic surgeons now, and you get a nose job so you look better in your selfie because everyone's noses are distorted from where they hold their cameras, and so you get those problems. And I noticed the kids started going from Instagram to then they'd have a fake Instagram account. Finstagram or something, then they went to Snapchat because it was less pressure because the things went away and they could be a little sillier. Then they moved to TikTok, where I don't even know what the heck they do on TikTok.
Dancing.
They just dance.
I kind of feel like TikTok might be the best of all of them in terms of like the health.
Right, they're not
just dancing around, having fun. Like my 12-year-old does the TikTok, and she's just like bouncing around with her friends.
Yeah, it doesn't seem that narcissistic to me.
Seems silly.
It seems more silly and more childish, and so it almost seems like there's so much pressure for those kids that they've migrated to doing these silly dances on TikTok. Now I don't know if this is true. It
seems to me that like Facebook is the most narcissistic in terms of expressing opinions. Instagram is the most narcissistic in terms of expressing your image. Yeah, and the photos and the manipulation of those photos.
Yeah.
Some people are just ridiculous with the shrinking their waist and increasing their
face shopping. Is that no? There's somebody told me face tuning.
Oh,
face tuning. Yeah, that's what they're telling me. This is the new thing. You face tune so you look better. Or
there's apps that'll turn you into a totally different person. There's an app that turned me into a girl. And my 10-year-old thought it was hilarious. Take a picture of me and run it through this app. And I was like, what is that? And she's like, that's you. Ha! She ran it through this app, and it turned me into a pretty girl. She did it again the other day. Look, I'll show you this picture. There's a side-by-side. It's the most ridiculous thing ever because it's actually me. And one of them is me, and one of them is me as a girl. And these girls that are growing up that have to deal with this shit, you don't know what anybody looks like, but you know what you look like. So you look at yourself in the mirror, and then you look at this
everyone else
fucking version of this shit. Where the hell is this goddamn thing? I'll find it.
So what's interesting about this, a lot's interesting, but 2 questions I ask are, what kind of esteem are you getting from putting out fake pictures?
Yeah.
Like, are you getting status by
I don't think it's working. I don't think you really do get anything. I think you're going to get something, but it never really comes. I think you're doing it based on the premise that you're going to develop esteem, and there's a famous Khloe Kardashian picture where she adjusted so many things that it became this thing that people were sharing just because it's so preposterous, because it literally looked nothing like her. So many people thought it was hilarious that they were just sending it back and forth like, what the fuck is she doing? Like, this is okay. I'm not finding this picture. It's taking too long.
Okay, you got an elk in there?
I got a lot of photos in here. I don't know why I don't have it. I thought I did.
It's okay.
But this photo is like a preposterous photo because everyone knows what she actually looks like, and then you look at this picture, it's like this perfect woman, and I'm like, who is that? And and underneath it, she wrote location under bitch's skin, so she's doing it. But everyone knows, this is where it's crazy. Like, everyone knows you don't look like that. Like, you're a famous person. It's not like she's taking a photo and like, hey, here's what I look like. Here's my selfie. What do you look like? And she says you that. You're like, whoa, she's really hot. If she sent you that picture and then you went to go meet her at the mall, you'd be like, who are you?
Catfished or whatever.
Yeah, who are you? You're not this person. Like, this is a different human. But by writing under bitch's skin, like, it exposes the mentality of these things. You're doing it to make people feel bad about what they look like. And this is so face-tuned in Photoshop that literally she forgot to add one of the sides of the chain she was wearing. So she's wearing this chain. One of them has disappeared because it's been absorbed in this filter.
But it's still working to get people upset because of her attractiveness.
It disturbs me how dumb people are. And it's not just that it gets people upset of her attractiveness, but also people that think it looks really good.
So so what if I said people aren't dumb, but people have a problem discounting for other explanations? Mm-hmm. So if I said, hey, I'm doing this, and all right, this is me, and you go, well, this is you, obviously, but I got to remember this is Photoshop. But 99% of the time, there's no Photoshop. So it's hard for me to discount the Photoshop, even though I know you're Photoshopped. So, I mean, there's old studies like this in the 60s. We have people, like with brainwashing in, North Korea, where they'd have people, you read a statement like, I think the Americans are awful or whatever. And people, even though they know they're under duress, will still sort of think they believe it.
Right.
And I wonder if there's something like that here, like, this is fake, but you're still kind of hot, or maybe it's just, or maybe it's like, man, you have such status. I don't know.
Well, men in general are really dumb, right?
Yeah.
Because we look at fake boobs and we go, wow, she's got nice boobs, even though you know they're fake. Like, they can be round, like a soccer ball.
Right.
But
it's cues. It's
something about it is our brain.
Yeah.
And we go, that's hot. We don't go, wow, how disturbing.
Not
is
a lot
this?
of reflection.
Right.
Yeah.
Very little. We just go with the good part of the feeling, like the sexual ape part of the feeling.
Right.
Yeah.
So I wonder if you do that with the I don't know. I mean, it's pretty interesting and then what happens if you're growing up in a world where like half the images are just fake?
A lot of the images that you see of people on Instagram have been fucked with. A lot. I don't know what the number is, but it's a lot.
A lot.
And when I put this photo up on my Instagram, I got messages from friends of mine that are girls that go, one of the things they would say is like, I use filters, but fuck, that's crazy. So I'm like, wow, okay, you use filters, but that's great. Well, why are you using filters? And some of these girls are like very pretty, which is even more insane. It's like, why would you use filters if you're already pretty? Like you already hit the genetic lottery in terms of facial features, but you want everything to be smooth. You want there to be no pores and...
Yeah, what's the filters going for? I mean, is it is it a certain look, or is it just to get rid, tighten it up?
It's to make you look younger and smoother and perfect. It's to like, if you do this and scrunch, you see those lines in your skin. Some people don't want to see any of that because they think that a line in the skin or a weirdness to the facial structure is negative. And really, it boils down to breeding choices, right? I mean, that's what it is. Like the geometry of your face.
Yeah.
Like that your jaw's wider, your eyes are a good distance apart, your cheeks are a solid size. You look like you'd be a good breeding candidate. I mean, that's really what we're doing.
It's kind of phi coefficients and
Yeah.
stuff. Yeah, it's pretty.
It's weird.
It is weird.
It's super weird when you look at these images when you know that they're photoshopped. Like there's, you know how the Explore, I don't know if you ever go to the Instagram thing, there's a little Explore section where you can just look at random people that you've never seen before. I found this one lady who all of her pictures made her look like a cartoon. Like all of them. Like she had like a filter that was like made in Russia.
But she didn't want to be a cartoon.
I don't think so.
Like this was her.
It's hard to know what she really looked like because all of her filters, the skin on her face was so bizarrely smoothed out that she looked animated. Like it looked terrible,
like uncanny, kind of.
Like she had like a cheap phone, and then she ran them through these cheap filters, and like this was her face, and like sometimes she'd have stars all around her face, and sometimes she'd have like it was weird.
I wish, I mean, like I know when we've done the work, looking at people who are more narcissistic, more grandiose, don't use as many filters because they just they think they look so good. They don't worry about it as much. And people more vulnerable, we notice using more filters. But I don't know if what you're talking about is strategic. Are you strategically trying to get more attention, or is this is it a fashion? I just don't know what the filters are supposed to do.
Well, I think it's preparing us for artificial reality. That's what I think. I think it's preparing us for virtual reality because, there's already virtual reality games where you could go and do you ever, what Sandbox is? You ever do that? Mm-mm. It's really cool. It's a VR place where you go to. They actually have one here in Austin. We went the other day. And you put on these VR goggles and a haptic feedback vest, and then you're a different thing inside this game. You could be like a pirate, or in this one game we played, we were robots. You're going to be able to put that on and be a beautiful person. And it's going to be crude at first, but eventually it's going to mimic the motion and the look of an actual person, and we're going to become accustomed to it. So if you don't like what you look like, you can go be some Raquel Welch from the 1960s. And you could be perfect, and you could do that inside this video game. Yeah. And I think that's going to be, I think whether it's through augmented reality, through glasses, virtual reality, one of those things is going to become real.
I agree, and I just don't know why it's taken so long. Because I went into one of our labs, this is years ago, and tried in a cave, where they have the virtual reality, and they have the sensors so they know where you're going, and it was really crude. And I was like, oh my God. This is amazing how real this is. I mean, I was standing over a pit, and I'm like, I'm going to die. It was great. So we did a study where we made people in a kind of fake Kim Kardashians. We made these avatars, to see, but it's so crude at this point. And then I've seen some of the stuff, and I'm like, this is going to take over the world. Because once you can just dial in and immerse in this, and then you start adapting these different avatars, and then what do those do to your personality? Do you become that person when you do it? Do you have what we call a simulation test? If you have an avatar of a fighter, do I become more aggressive?
Right.
Or do I do the opposite because I'm trying to, not act like Mike Tyson? It's going to be so interesting. But yeah, it scares the hell out of me.
Yeah, I think we're just a few decades away from not recognizing normal life anymore.
I think we passed that about 5 years ago. I'm sorry. I know.
You might be right. You might be right. Now, what if someone lives with or works with a narcissist? Like, what if you're a person and you say you're in an office, you work for a PR firm or something like that, your boss is a narcissist, and is there a way you can explain to a narcissist that they're a narcissist? Is there a way you can help them?
I wouldn't do that generally. I wouldn't go and sort of, if it's my boss, I wouldn't confront them about so the problem is somebody's narcissistic and you confront them, you can get reactions that are aggressive. Yeah. So the classic formula for aggression is you take somebody who's narcissistic and you say you suck, or you say you can't do that, you can't have that.
So what do you do if there's a CEO of a company and you're working your way up the ladder and your boss is a narcissist?
So you have to protect yourself, because what happens is you might get manipulated or lied about or whatever. So keep records of everything. Make sure everything's above board. And then if you do want to manipulate somebody like that, you kind of suck up to them. I mean, that's what people do. And you see in these corporations that people who are narcissistic will have these suck-ups, these kind of yes men or yes women that follow them around.
That's what they always say about Trump, right?
Well, I mean, I assume
those are the only people that work around him because he fires everybody else.
I assume that's what those guys do. Yeah. I mean, that's so one of the things you can have happen is you can just become kind of a sycophant of a, of a narcissistic boss. But I don't think that's what anyone wants to do.
No, you become like a lamprey on the bottom of the shark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You're just kind of following up. You're just lampreying on that bad boy. So that's a strategy to get through life if you want. I don't recommend it, but usually the other thing is if somebody's that narcissistic, they've done it to you and they've done it to a bunch of people, whatever they're doing. So find allies. Find strength in numbers, figure out what's going on, keep records, make sure the person's not crossing any lines. If they cross lines, go to HR. Don't put yourself in a position where you can get exploited. Be careful about trusting, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And if you're nice to somebody like that, they might like you. And if you criticize them, they'll like you less. So that's where that conflict comes in.
That's terrible strategy, though.
I'm sorry, man. I know, it's the worst.
I just can imagine myself being in an office working for someone like that going, fuck.
Yeah. Usually you just want to get the hell out. I mean, that's the problem. Or you try to get the person promoted. I mean, this is what happens in real life. You try to get them promoted out so you get a better boss. I mean, people do a lot of horrible things.
That's hilarious. Try to get them promoted out, get them moving to a better job.
Right.
So
you're so good. Let's see if, you know what, or if you were that good,
you
should be the king of, maybe over and, you should move to Texas. Have you thought about moving? Yeah.
What do you think about psychedelics for people with personality disorders?
Jesus, that's a wide open question. I can give you a very long answer if you don't mind.
I don't mind at all.
Okay. So there's been this explosion in psychedelic research, and the history was psychedelic medicines were really popular in the 40s and 50s, early 60s, and famously, Bill W. at AA was a proponent of LSD to induce mystical experience, because inducing mystical experience seemed to be a way of getting people past alcoholism. So there's a lot of interest, and when it all got shut down in the 70s, it all kind of went underground. People used MDMA for a while, and then they found out about that and said it has no benefit, and so they shut it down. And so we're in this weird place now where the research is coming back. People in these research centers are really interested in MDMA and psilocybin for treatment, and they're focusing on PTSD, a lot of trauma therapy, and they're focused on couples therapy. Those seem to be a couple big ones. And so those treatments are going on. The other thing that's going on are people doing shamanic medicines. So people are going to Costa Rica or Peru primarily to do ayahuasca, huachuma, San Pedro, and they're doing those retreats because they're illegal in the U.S. and they're trying to heal. So I have a student, Brandon Weiss, who should get all the credit for this, who was interested in studying psychedelics several years ago. It's been probably 4 years. And so we were interested in measuring personality change in psychedelic use. And so what we did is went down to measure people in some of these centers and measure the personality before going down, before using the psychedelics, a week after, and then a follow-up, 3-month follow-up, looking at personality changes. And also getting peer reports of personality. So not just measuring their personality, but saying, hey, get a friend to see if their friend sees your personality's changed. Because it's easy to get people to say their personality changed, but you want to confirm it with a peer to make sure it's legit. So we've been working on the plant medicine side of this, which is a whole different bag of tricks than the other psychedelic side. And long story short, what Brandon's dissertation found was that people using the ayahuasca had a big decrease in what we call neuroticism, which is this personality trait that has to do with anxiety and depression and hostility. So that we found a big drop in that. So then I was talking to Brandon like a week or two ago, and I'm like, I'm going on Joe Rogan, man. What do you got for narcissism? He goes, dude, I'll check it out for you. So Brandon sent me the data on narcissism a couple days ago. This is just fresh. This is not science. I mean, there's scientific data, but it needs to be written up. I'm just talking. But what it looks like that the more extroverted piece of narcissism wasn't changing, going down. If anything, it was going up a little bit. The more like drive. The piece that had to do with vulnerability, insecurity was improving. So that seemed to be getting better. But we had a measure of entitlement in that study, like a sense of entitlement, and that didn't seem to change.
Really?
Yeah, which I thought, well, that would change. So where the biggest action seems to be is this broader sense of like depression, anxiety, neuroticism, more than sort of entitlement. At least in this is just a text message from...
The weakness seems to have been healed.
Yes.
But the strength seems to maybe have been enhanced.
A little bit. Yeah. Yeah.
And for some people, that's not good.
Yeah, but I'm guessing for the people, so when I first got interested in the psychedelics, the research had looked at a trait we call openness to experience. And openness is a broad trait that has to do with creativity and philosophy and aesthetics and interest. And so what they found in this research at Hopkins of people doing psilocybin, mushrooms, reported their openness increasing. So I thought, well, gee, we do ayahuasca, people are going to get super open after that. Turns out the people who go down and drink ayahuasca are already pretty open to start with. So it's really almost like a screen. Like you're only getting people that are already pretty curious, open, creative people that are going to do it.
Right, like healthy user bias.
Yeah,
kind of
it's
thing.
the bias. Yeah. So we got a selection bias, I think. So we're not really seeing that. And so I don't think the risk down there is really, there could be a risk of ego inflation. I'm not so concerned about it. I think more what's going on is it seems to be trauma that's healed a little bit. This stuff is so intense and so I started, when I started trying to figure this out a little bit, I thought, well, you just go ask the shaman, because this is a story. So the first guy to study narcissism was a guy named Havelock Ellis, who was this British, maybe Australian back in from Australia, but British sexologist. Sexologist. So he started studying narcissism because it was like self-pleasuring, like self-love. And this same guy, very curious dude, he also went to the Southwest United States in the late 1800s and discovered them eating peyote. So he brought peyote back to Britain and gave it to a bunch of friends and wrote the first scientific article on peyote use, called something like the artificial fantasy or something. Really cool. And he wrote this paper and he's like, well, we did it and we felt sick and then we turned the lights down and pretty soon we were kind of using it the way the Indians did it. And I thought, you know what? Maybe you should have just asked them before you stole their sacred plant. Maybe have a conversation or two and say, what is this sacred plant? And so, Brandon met with people and I've talked to people that do this and say, what do you think's going on? How do you see it? Because as an outsider, I'm like, I just think of the brain becoming plastic and the new pathways developing. What's that metaphor? And when I talk to the people down there, they're saying this is really about healing trauma and they see a lot of these negative energies and they're trying to clean these energies off you. And it's like very much a healing thing. But what they're talking about is spiritual and what I do is psychology. And there's a bridge between the two that's hard to cross, if that makes sense. So I can understand the spiritual practice down there, but it's hard to talk about that in psychology terms. So I can understand the personality process, but it's hard to talk about that in spiritual terms, if that makes sense. We're kind of like two different disciplines, and if you're not Carl Jung, it's hard, which is why all the people doing research in psychedelics are using neuroscience.
So when you're comparing how people come in versus go out, like it sounds like there's relatively little data, and it's kind of being accumulated, and a lot of it is guesswork.
It is very little data. When I do a personality study, I want a sample of a couple hundred people. like 200 people in my study, 250. Because
So like if you had 250 people that were diagnosed with some version of narcissistic personality disorder or narcissism,
Yeah.
you would want to study them for a while before you sent them down there. Like what would you like if I gave you like
if
carte
I really
blanche?
wanted
Yeah.
to do this study
Yeah.
for real, I mean, you'd have to do a placebo controlled. So you'd have to have your your Maloka set up and your shaman, and you'd have to have one condition where they're drinking this awful stuff that's bad espresso, but it's not ayahuasca, and the other condition they drink the ayahuasca. So you have to have a placebo controlled trial.
I wonder how many people would trip balls on the placebo.
Well, they've done this, and people they sense it's real, but I don't think they trip balls. I don't know. I mean, people say that, but I'm like, really?
Yeah, it's hard when people have expectations of an experience, and then they convince themselves they're having that experience.
Yeah. Well, in the psychedelic work, it always comes back to set and setting,
Yeah.
like mindset and setting. And
So if you're in the jungle and you're drinking a placebo,
right, and you've come in there and you've been working on your intention, and you've gone into diet ahead of time, you're dieting, you're there, something's going to happen. I mean, you could go down there and do a ceremony, but it's very hard for me to imagine somebody having the same experience they would with ayahuasca in their mind. People report things like that, but I don't know. But that's how you do it right. You do a placebo-controlled trial. So they do these trials with ayahuasca in Brazil, where they'll have you drink a cup of ayahuasca or a cup of tea that tastes like ayahuasca, and they'll put you in the scanner, like an fMRI. The problem with those trials, though, is you don't have the whole shamanic effects.
right?
So you
Set and setting.
you don't have set and setting, and
Yeah.
so the work we're doing is really interested in the whole shamanic process. But you can't say, well, it's the molecule of it's not DMT, it's ayahuasca, it's the process.
One of the things that comes out of the heavy psychedelics, whether it's psilocybin or DMT or any of the other ones, is ego death. Like there's something that
Yeah.
happens to you where
Yeah.
the ego gets diminished. I think for me, maybe the most profound one was 5-MeO DMT. That was a very heavy ego death experience because it made you feel like you didn't exist for a while. It lacks the visuals of NN-DMT, and you feel like you're literally a molecule in the center of the universe. Like you are a part of everything, and nothing about you is even remotely significant. You're just a part, and then when you come back to it, you feel like your ego is sort of scrambling to put its pants back on and tie its shoes.
No.
Yeah, like what does? And then you can feel it. You can feel your ego trying to regain control of the situation and like brushing itself off. And I remember making this concerted effort to try to grasp where my mind was when I came out of it. And before the ego would come back, like to try to recognize, like, oh, one of the I was thinking when I came back, like, even the way I talk, like when I'm saying things, a lot of times I'm saying things, I want them to sound intelligent, not just because I'm trying to convey a thought clearly, but I want people to think I'm smart. Like I want it to come off like, oh, I like the way that sounded. That was a smooth sounding sentence, or if not smart, at least that I'm interesting to listen to. So there was like a trick to even formulating sentences that you're not just expressing yourself, but you're expressing yourself with the intention of pleasing or impressing others. And that was real. I was real aware of that. Maybe for one of the first times clearly in my life, I was like, oh, that's kind of gross. It made me think about it.
The fakeness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's gross being fake.
Fakeness and all, not just fakeness, but like the intention behind it. That it wasn't entirely pure, And I was thinking that death of the ego, like if there's anything that is haunting narcissists, it's an out of control ego. It's like this is part of it. Maybe that would be an effective therapy, but maybe it would have to be done over a period of multiple sessions.
So I have some questions because I haven't tried 5-MeO, and this is. So you have full ego, like you just molecule in the universe?
Feel like I felt like I fucked up. Right when I did it, I was like, oh my God, I'm dead.
Jesus.
Like really, more than any other psychedelic. Because you don't see anything. It's just all white. You're gone. Everything's gone. Nothing's, you feel like you got shot through a cannon to the middle of everything. And you get there's a weird sense that we have, I guess, because of gravity, where you feel the floor underneath you, and so you get a sense that that's down, and that this is up, and that that's left, that's right. When I did 5-MeO, I didn't have any feeling like that was no longer real. And instead, it was like down was infinite, up was infinite, left and right were infinite, and you didn't exist anymore. It was like it broke down the barriers, like all the form of being a human, whether it's blood, tissue, bone, personality, breath, everything just went down to cells, and then it went down to atoms, and then those atoms are part of the soup of atoms that are all around you.
So I've got a million questions for ask too. Did you feel there was a message other than what you told me? Did you feel there was a spiritual voice there?
No.
Or there was something there? It's just boom,
just boom. It was different. In DMT, the DMT that you experience in ayahuasca, I've felt entities. I've had communication.
Yeah.
I've felt intelligence. I've been mocked and jeered at and laughed at and shown love and shown beautiful things. I didn't feel any of that in 5-methoxy. 5-methoxy DMT was really it's a stronger psychedelic experience, apparently, ounce per ounce, gram per gram than regular DMT is.
So
more potent.
Did you find you benefited from that?
Maybe. I only did it twice. I think one thing I did get out of it was that realization that how much the ego really does have a grasp on what you're doing all the time, even if you don't think it does. And that sometimes there's probably some benefit in terms of your performance in certain things with that desire to do well and desire to communicate in an impressive way. Like there's some benefit to that, clearly. And for me, as a person who communicates professionally, is probably some benefit to that. But it was also the stark contrast of how preposterous that seemed when you are broken down to atoms and shot to the center of the universe, and you realize that you're just a part of some weird cosmic soup. Yeah. And you're literally made out of stardust. And there's just all this weirdness to it. But there was no me. That was what was most disturbing. In the other DMT experiences that I've had, there's a me. There's me going, keep it together, don't freak out. Keep it together, don't freak out. Let it happen, let it go. There's all that internal dialogue going on, like, wow. There was none of that. I didn't exist anymore. I was gone.
See, that does... I mean,
Didn't
it sounds kind of... It doesn't sound fun. Like, I kind of want to do it just because it's like, come on, I got to try that. But
McKenna didn't enjoy it. Terrence McKenna did not enjoy that version. He didn't like it.
That's not a good recommendation. You don't want that on your, you kind of, psychedelic rental by owner. 1 star from McKenna Brothers. It's just not good.
Yeah.
So when people talk about ego death, so this is such a great question because like narcissism is ego, but it's sort of one way to have ego. It's sort of an easy to see ego. It's partly why I study. It's kind of entertaining. It's big. And you can have an ego that's all about fear, where you're just scared all the time. And, so ego does a lot of things, not just narcissism. But what you're talking about is like foundationally, like how do you get to that core of being? And they talk about ego death in the psychedelic community. And I started, we use their scales to measure this. We have instruments to measure ego death. And I've looked at them and measured them. And it seems like people they mean that in different ways. So when you're telling me like I was blown into the Akashic, whatever quantum field into notothingness, I'm like, that sounds like ego death.
It felt like actual death.
Like fucking death. Yeah.
That was what the scariest part about is I felt like, oh my God, I really fucked up. I'm dead.
It's ego death. So that to me sounds like ego death. There's stuff that's happened on ayahuasca where you get eaten alive and you feel like you're dying, your bones are scattered through the wilderness. And that seems like ego death. People have experiences like that. And then there's experiences people talk about like, I was looking at the ocean and I just kind of drifted off into nothingness or it kind of just drifted away. And I'm like, that sounds like you just got a little high and relaxed. It kind of sounds like napping. You know what I mean? Like what you're talking about ego death versus like, I just kind of took some mushrooms and looked at the sunset and but in the questionnaires, it's hard to distinguish between those things because we just haven't, there's not a lot of people who've experienced ego death.
I think in some of them, like we were talking about towns being by the ocean where people are chill, because you're just confronted by the majesty of the ocean. There's something about these majestic experiences that are so overwhelmingly powerful that they just put you in check. Like standing next to an elephant. You think you're a strong person, like I'm a bad motherfucker. You stand next to an elephant, you're like, yikes. It just puts it in perspective when you feel this enormous, massive animal that's like, it leaves no doubt that this thing is infinitely more powerful than you. There's something about the psychedelic experience that does that as well. Like it is so mind-blowing that it forces you to sort of recalibrate your significance.
So here's the problem with somebody like me doing this kind of work is the big side effect of, one of the big side effects of ayahuasca. So I studied this because I find it fascinating, but I don't recommend it to people because the side effects are religious. These drugs are entheogenic.
Yeah.
They kind of God awakening. And I started doing this work and I'm like, holy shit, this stuff's real. And it gets very hard when you see some of this spiritual stuff happen to go back and go, it's just fake.
What do you mean by the side effects are religious?
Meaning that if they've done these big surveys of people taking DMT and they see aliens, they see entities. And when they're doing it, when you're doing it in a shamanic context, the medicine itself has a spirit, Mama Ayahuasca or San Pedro or, Combo, all the visionary medicines have their own entities and they open you up so these entities go in, and then the shaman are controlling the space to make sure the bad entities don't get in and the good entities come in and, help clean out the bad entities and stuff. And so they're working on this sort of spiritual realm that they see very clearly. They see it, but it's very hard you can't really see it from the outside.
Yeah.
It's very hard to talk about psychologically.
Right.
I don't really have a good language for it. So you do this stuff and you start experiencing entities and you go, how do I make sense of that? What do I call those? Do I say it's the collective unconscious?
It seems to me that the only way people understand what you're talking about is if they've experienced it themselves.
Yes.
And then they're like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because you can talk about this to people that don't have any psychedelic experience and they just seem to think you're a loon.
Right, that's what I'm trying to talk about
too
much.
Yeah, but if you talk to it to someone who's been there before, they're like, okay, okay.
Yeah.
So, and then they're like, and then what?
Yeah. So I guess what I'm saying is my concern is as a scientist is I started working, like I've hung out in a lot of indigenous cultures. I've traveled with it. I fish a lot. I surf. I travel. I've just been to a lot of places, seen a lot of cool stuff. So I started working in the shamanic context and seeing what's going on. And I think for me, I'm like, there's something real here. And it's something super powerful. And these guys know medicine that we don't know. And it's a little frightening that I don't have language for it.
Well, there's an ego, when you talked about ego, there's a perception that the West has that we have the best answers.
Yeah, I don't think we do. I think we kind of suck.
But they're great in comparison to some cultures that exist in the world. But then when you deal with these cultures that have this mastery of this mystical medicine, all of a sudden you're like, maybe we're full of shit.
Maybe there's another layer to things that we're just not so good at. And maybe we're really good at these certain limited problems that we nailed. And then we got our egos like, we can solve all the problems.
Right. It's like someone who's really good at playing chess and they have this understanding of chess and they're really good at chess. And so they think, well, obviously I'm superior because I'm great at chess. But then they're around someone who's an amazing gymnast. And they're like, oh, wait a minute. I can't do that. I've spent all my time doing this.
Yeah.
but I didn't learn that, and I thought that this was superior. And then I'm watching you do the uneven bars and fly through the air and land on the balance beam, and I can't do that.
Yeah, it's in a whole different plane of existence.
So we're experiencing Western life with traffic and internet access and all these different things, and we've gotten really good at this. So we think that this is the way to live because I can send you an email. Yeah. You can't send me an email when you're in the jungle and you got a leaf in your hand. That's nonsense. These people are fools, eating bananas. But when you go there and you see what they can do with their plant medicine, and you experience what they're saying when they're playing their songs, and you realize the song is actually guiding the psychedelic experience, you're like, oh, so they're very, very sophisticated in a world that I don't even have any information about whatsoever.
Yes. And the training is so different. So for me to get a PhD, I find a mentor, I study a topic, I study it for several years, and by 5 years, I'm able to produce knowledge on my own. So if I can go write research, that means you're a PhD. You're able to produce new knowledge. If I'm in the jungle and I want to study ayahuasca, I don't read a bunch of books and do a study. I sit by myself in a hut by the water and I drink it. I drink a little bit and I diet. I do a diet and I sit with this medicine for a month or whatever the period of time is for months till I understand the medicine. You can sit with tobacco and study it for months. And you understand how tobacco works, and you understand it better than anyone. So it's just
what do you mean
different
by tobacco? Like, what do you do with tobacco?
Well, like my shaman,
a lot of shamans use tobacco.
They use tobacco as like a master plant, and so when they diet, they'll drink it, they'll smoke it, they'll do like new, like.
What is the active ingredient in the nicotine or the tobacco itself?
I think it's the nicotine I've heard the term machupa, like jungle tobacco they use, and I've heard it's a very powerful master medicine. Obviously, it is in all the natives.
They blow tobacco smoke in people's faces.
Yeah, they blow the tobacco, but they also use it where they make a powder, like a snuff, and they blow it through a tube at your nose. You kind of I don't know why you put your hands up, you just inhale and they shoot it up your nose. It's a very potent form. They have this very powerful chewing tobacco where they take like a huge thing and make it really small and you chew it. I think that it works with the ayahuasca too, the MAO, but this is sort of out of my expertise area. But I know it's a very important medicine for them. So it's something you train with, and you use it. So if I was doing a ceremony and I had trained with tobacco, I would use that tobacco to help me in the ceremony. So tobacco would be like an ally for me. Yeah.
And do they specifically target certain aspects of people's personalities when they go on these experiences? Like, does anybody do that, or do they just give you a trip and what you find you were supposed to find, or you just find whatever you find and deal with it?
So, my understanding, and this is just talking to people who do this. I have done research, but not a lifetime of work. Is that they're looking for energies. So very much it's like you see these negative energies and you're working on them. I mean, the idea is you have a soul, a soul body, a causal body, what is it in Indian, a Nanda Maya Kosha? I don't know. It's kind of a bliss body. And that's where these problems happen. Sort of you get damage there, is this karmic damage, and these psychic remoras are kind of attaching to. This is why it doesn't make any sense psychologically. And they're kind of going in there and go, let's get these off of you. Let's get your soul clean so you can do it again. But that's the kind of stuff they're seeing. It's not really working with psychology, but you go in there, with an intention, set and setting. So you go like, I want to be more loving. I want to heal this pain. I want to be a better dad, I mean, the work I do is always trying to be a better parent, just trying to be a better human. Right. But people are doing stuff like that, but it isn't like going to a psychologist like, well, how was your childhood? Right. How are your behaviors? You're not doing any of that. It's just it's just kind of very, I guess, uncharted medicine. And some of the discussions they're having down there are, do you frame it more in terms of a Western frame? Do you interpret it? Do you not interpret it for people? I mean, they're kind of, it sounds to me like they're developing a hybrid system that's a little bit Western, but sort of foundationally, Do
you think that's because of demand? Like Western people are demanding some structure to it?
I think so.
Is that good or bad, though?
I don't know. Everything changes. Yeah. I mean, that's the way, these systems just kind of cycle around. And, they learned it. The people of the Shipibo learned it from another group, and they probably learned it from the Incas, and it's probably changed. And then the Westerners get down there, and it changes, and probably some Westerners get down there and try to just what they did with tobacco.
Right.
They could try to strip it out and sell it, and just do all sorts of Westerner stuff. But
what did you mean when you were saying that it's more like religion? When you were talking about the experience, that it's
meaning that when you're dealing with if I go to John Hopkins and take synthetic psilocybin, I'll have a psychedelic experience. I'm using synthetic psilocybin, so I'm not going to throw up. I'm not going to feel sick. I'm just going to sit there and put something over my head and relax, and that's going to be my experience. I go in to do plant medicine. I'm going to take a medicine like ayahuasca. It's going to be in its natural form. I'm going to feel sick. I'm going to hopefully throw up or have diarrhea. I'm going to purge. And that purge is super important. That's like part of the healing process is purging. So it's different. And then the entity in ayahuasca is going to heal me. The spirit of ayahuasca, it's like a spirit is going to do the work along with the singing of the shaman. So there's a spiritual energy that's supposed to be the active agent in here. Like we don't really have words for this in psych. I mean, Carl Jung talked about this stuff, but in 100 years, psychology has been very behaviorist. We just don't have good language for this kind of thing. So the concern is, I mean, people that live I live in this very Western kind of world, and then you go and see something else, you go, holy crap, how do you come back? It's hard for people. But if you just go do the normal psychedelics, there's no spiritual aspect. You go take them, you don't throw up, and maybe you have the same healing. You don't have to have all those questions. That's the risk.
When I wish there was a way where we could bring that to America and have people who were like licensed professionals. If there was like a shamanic research board,
yes,
and you passed a bar of how to be a shaman, and I think there's probably some beauty in going to these cultures where everything is as it's been for thousands and thousands of years. We don't have any control over it, but there's a lot of people that don't want to go to the jungle.
No, and I think what's going to happen is there's going to be, first of all, there's all the normal psychiatric medicines. No one's getting rid of those. But if those aren't working, you'll try maybe MDMA or and you're not going to get the ego death with MDMA.
You get a little bit of it, right?
Well, what I've seen in the literature, I'm not
Have
a
you?
psychonaut, man. I'm just a dad. I
Right.
drive a minivan. I just hang out with some psychonauts. But the literature is usually that the mescaline-based drugs or MDMA don't get the profound ego death like you would with like 5-MeO,
Right.
like you were saying. So they're a little more gentle. So it probably won't be as profound, and so it's be less risk. Psilocybin can be a little crazier, I think. So probably people would do those, but if some people that are a little more intrepid might want to go to the jungle, it's more intense, it's more interesting, but it's probably going to be the more open people, more curious.
It's so funny as an adult, as a person, it seems like you go through this structuring process from the time you're a baby to the time you're an adult, and then you kind of deal with what state your mind and personality are at, and then you try to do some repair work. And while you're trying to do this repair work, you're dealing with these underlying structures that have existed in your body and your mind for decade upon decade, and they've carved these very deep paths of just you're used to things. You're used to the way you are, and it's very difficult for people to change. I think it's one of the reasons why we've had this cynical approach to people who are narcissists or people with ego problems, that is just who you are forever. And I now don't, who you were 20 years ago is who you are today, and that's who you'll be 20 years from now, period.
Right.
That you're fucked.
Set in plaster.
Yeah. Because these paths are cut so deeply.
So, it makes me think, Tim Ferriss, right? He's down here. He's done amazing. He's given all this money to MAPS and he's been a huge support to psychedelic research. Amazing what he's done. And he talks about, he uses the metaphor of clay, that you're kind of, your life is grooved. You have these clay, kind of grooved in clay, and this is how you act. And what the psychedelics do is loosen that up and allow you to put in new grooves if you want. I think that metaphor is good. The people at Imperial College and stuff sometimes use a snow globe metaphor, like, the snow globe's calm and then you shake it up and the psychedelics are shaking it up and allow the snow to fall differently. I sometimes think of those my metaphors always suck, but I think of those glass animals in Venice, you have like your glass elephant, with all these spears stuck in you from life, you just, everything you've done, just get these spears jabbed in you. And the psychedelics allow you to kind of heat up and pull some of those out and heal a little bit. So, but that metaphor of the psychedelics opening up these channels and allow you to work is, I think, a powerful metaphor because it's what happens. It also tells you if you're doing this stuff, have a frickin' professional with you and don't do it at home or I'm not, do whatever you want at a fish show, but this is dangerous, powerful medicine. And if you're going to be crafting your psyche, you want people with you that know what they're doing, that aren't evil people.
When you set out to write this book, we should talk about this book.
Sorry.
The New Science of Narcissism.
We haven't even got to UFOs yet.
I'd love to get to that.
God.
Let's get to that right after we
do my book.
What was your intention? Was your intention to sort of illuminate these issues for people, to help them guide their own way through it and find out what strategies they have, or just to diagnose it and describe it as a condition?
I've been studying narcissism for probably 25, 30 years. It's been that long just because I started doing it in grad school, and I have a whole bunch of implicit or tacit knowledge. Like I just know it a lot that's not written down, and I got to put this all down so anybody who wants to figure out narcissism can grab this, read it, and kind of know what's going on, and then they can go figure out what they want from there. So I wrote it a bit like a tool for people who really want to understand it. And then change. I'm not so good. I don't like telling people what to do.
I can tell that.
You can
You're
tell.
a pretty easygoing guy.
I just hate telling. I'm like, man, you got to find your own journey. Plot your own adventure. Fuck, I'm doing my best.
I get it. You're doing your best. Like, you got to do your best, too.
Do your best, man. But, like, here are the tools. And then I wrote the book, and I try to explain, like, here's how personality works. I try to explain a little bit, like, here's how we assess personality so you don't be an idiot and take a bunch of tests online. Like, I try to explain to people how this thing works in simple terms. I don't know if it worked, but that's my effort.
UFOs.
Yeah, I'm like, what the hell are interdimensional UFOs? What are the dimensions? I can't figure this out.
Well, I mean, even the phrase interdimensional UFOs, that's never really been defined.
I know, but don't people talk about this?
Yeah,
I was
people
like,
talk about all kinds of horse shit.
Right. I was like, but who's going to know? I'm like, Joe Rogan, I got to figure this out. I'm like, what the hell's an interdimensional? What's the dimension?
You came to the wrong place. I have no idea if that's even might be total nonsense.
I assume it's total nonsense. I just wonder what it is.
Well, I think when people say that, they're just grasping at straws. Like, if you could say for sure this is an interdimensional alien life form, wow, you would have the most amazing peer-reviewed paper ever, right?
Pretty good one, yeah.
In order to say that, you would have to have some real data.
Yeah.
You'd have to be able to demonstrate. You'd have to be able to show how this is provable, either with some sort of mathematics or some kind of evidence.
Something.
Right.
Yeah.
You can't just say it's an interdimensional UFO. But people do say things like that.
So that's what it is. Somebody just said that's what it is.
Well, one of the things when you talk about narcissism and ego, one of the things that people do, they do like to pretend that they are special. And this is one of the reasons why I'm so very, very skeptical about personal psychic experiences, personal UFO experiences, personal experiences with Bigfoot or whatever it is, because it instantaneously makes you more significant than you are without those experiences. So if you're a person that has been abducted by a UFO, and I'm not saying that people haven't. Yeah. If people have had that experience, I have no idea what your experience has been. But if you are full of shit and you say you have been abducted by a UFO, you are automatically, instantly more interesting.
Yeah.
Instantly.
Yeah.
Instantly. You're interesting, more fascinating. You're interesting in a way that no one else is, because you've experienced this godlike creature from another world.
Right.
And they have chosen you for some strange reason. Maybe you have a particular genetic sequence that they're interested in, or maybe you have been chosen throughout your entire life, and that's why you're so special.
Seated.
Yeah, there's a thing about this, the people wanting to be special, the chosen one. But I talked to this lady that was telling me that she channels UFO from another planet, and she was telling me all this nonsense that all the different things she does. And I said, "Are you on medication?" And she got like really really upset at me for asking her if she's on medication. I'm like, that's a legitimate question. Like you're telling me that you are in contact and you channel a being from another planet. You just expect me. You're not saying at all, I know this sounds crazy.
Yeah.
You're not
like,
saying.
Dude, I know this is nuts.
No, instantaneous, grandiose behavior. Instantaneous,
Okay.
I need to respect this because this is real. Like I am forced in this position where she has this knowledge that's coming from this interstellar time traveling entity or whatever the fuck it is, and
It communicates as a medium.
it's a type of mental disorder, and this is not discounting actual real
right.
extraterrestrial experiences because they very well may be real. I don't. If you're talking about unique experiences, novel, unique experiences that you haven't had, how do you know? You don't know. It's like if you were trying to describe ayahuasca to someone who had never experienced it, like that guy's full of shit. But then if you took the ayahuasca, you'd be like, oh my God, it's real. That could be the exact same thing in terms of UFO abduction or UFO experiences and close encounters. I don't know, but I do know that there's something about expressing that you have had these experiences that makes you command respect in some weird way that I don't like. Because it makes me like, all of a sudden you're special. You're the chosen one. Are you really? You know, you're a channeler. You know, you're doing a seance. You're talking to people from the great beyond. You're channeling some entity from 400 million light years away. Are you really?
Yeah.
Or is this bullshit? Because it seems like it's bullshit.
Yeah.
That's the problem is that there's too many people that take advantage of this narrative that there are UFOs out there or that Bigfoot is out there. I was in the woods. I experienced him. He talked to me through his mind. I understood his languages.
Bigfoot talks to people telepathically?
Oh, sure.
I mean,
I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, there's enough stories out there of people that you can get kind of any combination of those variables. Like Bigfoot's interdimensional. Bigfoot's from another planet. Bigfoot knows where the cameras are. That's why you never take pictures of them. But I did a show for the Sci-Fi Channel a few years back called Joe Rogan Questions Everything, and I went into it far more enthusiastic about these subjects than I came out. When I came out of it, I was thinking there's a lot of people with mental illness, and that's what a lot of this is. The more I thought about it, the more I'm like, this is just a lot of people like searching for meaning. One of the things that I was saying is like you find a lot of unfuckable white guys. Like that's when you go looking for UFOs or Bigfoot. It seems like people that have been left out of the dating game. They're
I'm just calling that like one scale I'm not going to develop. The unfuckable white guy scale, not happening. Nope, not this lifetime.
That's what it seemed like. It was like a lot of people that just they're not getting a lot of attention otherwise.
But they want it
that way. Yes, they want it, and they really go out of their way to talk about these experiences and make them seem incredibly significant. Whether it's a Bigfoot experience or a UFO experience, abduction experiences, encounters, all these different things, but they're very rarely are they even remotely believable. If you're a person who's accustomed to people telling the truth.
Yeah.
And this is a thing that I also found out. When people lie a lot, they are not good at detecting lies. And they're not good at recognizing when other people detect their lies. Like someone who's like a pathological liar, they lie all the time, they make things up all the time. They must lie to themselves too.
Yeah, they're just going for it.
Yeah.
Just lie. And,
I think they lie to themselves as well.
Yeah.
I don't think they're like super brutally honest to themselves and then lie to other people. I think no one wants to be a liar. So when you've decided that you're just going to start lying about things, you're probably, instead of thinking like, hey, I better make this lie good, you're probably like psychologically twisted and you're fucked up. So they would tell these stories that they don't resonate. When someone's like, we were talking earlier about people being like authentic and authenticity resonates. These stories don't resonate at all. There's no resonate, but occasionally you get one that does. I talked to a lady that said she saw Bigfoot and she did not seem full of shit at all, but I think she saw a bear. That's what I think.
It's a real sighting, but just a miss.
Bears walk on 2 feet all the time. And black bears walk on 2 feet
Yeah.
all the time. And she saw this thing, and she was in the Pacific Northwest, which if you've ever been up there in the forest, it's insanely wooded. It's
Dense, you can't,
yeah, it's like Q-tips. Like you buy a box of Q-tips, that's how the trees are stacked next to each other.
Yeah.
And she saw this thing walking through the woods on its hind legs, and I bet it was a bear. I bet it was black bears are
Yeah.
frequent up there, and I bet it was a bear that had a hurt paw or something and was just walking on 2 legs. They do it all the time. There's a lot of video of black bear walking on 2 legs. There's no
that's what they
video of
think that-
Bigfoot.
Like the abominable snowman or Yeti, they think is a bear too, right?
Could be,
It could
for
be
sure.
a bear.
Yeah, could be.
I've never seen a Bigfoot. I've seen a wolverine. I've seen wolves.
Oh, have you really seen a
Yeah,
wolverine?
I saw a wolverine. That was
Wow.
once in my whole life and the guide I was with was like, "Oh my God, it's a wolverine!"
That's a crazy
because
animal.
you never see them.
They're pretty rare.
But if I saw a wolverine, I've never come close to a Bigfoot.
Yeah,
and I
well-
hang out with a lot of guides, and they haven't either.
It's so attractive though. It's one of those things where even if you did see it, it would be so hard to know if someone was telling the truth. Like if someone saw it and they were telling you, it'd be so hard to know if they're telling the truth because so many people are full of shit, and it's such an attractive thing to see. Like if you tell a person that you saw, I was in the forest, I saw a Sasquatch, like automatically people roll their eyes like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
But if you did, how would I know? I would have to. It would have to resonate with me. But I still wouldn't know. I'd be guessing. I can't tell if people are lying. I'd like to believe I can.
I mean, it's very hard to tell if people are lying.
That's why the UFO thing and all this interdimensional thing. That's why I think it has something to do with mental illness. It has something to do with personality disorders.
Yeah, I get that sense too that there's like a weirdness in there too. There's some narcissism, but there's also just some like weird. You see this with fame. So Roy Baumeister is he's a famous social psychologist. My postdoc advisor did a paper with Len Newman on alien abduction in the 90s. And their theory was that people had, what hypnagogic hallucinations are? Like you're asleep and you feel like you're frozen and you're awake and you can't move. And
Yeah, sleep paralysis.
yeah, exactly. So they get that state or they're highway hypnosis or something and they go, something weird happened. I'll go ask people and no one says anything. And they run into somebody and goes, oh, maybe you were abducted by an alien. And they have this, and then they go talk to an alien expert and that guy goes, what happens? And people go, well, I felt like I was frozen. And they hypnotize me like, what happened? Like, well, there's a tractor beam and it put me up. And then they inspected me and they put a chip in me. And there's like a whole alien narrative. And I used to teach this in my class and I'd say like, what happens when you get abducted by aliens? And the whole class would know. They know what happens. They know how aliens work. They all knew about the anal probe. And I'm like, so we have an entire narrative in this culture about alien abductions, but we don't have alien abductions. It's the weirdest thing, but it makes it easy for people to think they're abducted because they all know the narrative.
Right.
So so I thought it was interesting, but then when I saw that dude on your show that actually was
Commander
a pilot.
Fravor.
Yeah, when I saw him,
That's
and I'm like,
different.
and I'm listening to him flying, and I've flown Mexico a lot when I was a kid, and I'm like, this guy's not lying. I know he's not lying.
This is what we're talking about now.
That's the resonance, right?
Yeah, so David Fravor is a legit Air Force pilot or Navy.
I
pilot.
wasn't.
He's a pilot for the Navy. Legit pilot, has been the enormous portion of his life and knows a tremendous amount about aircrafts and the way he describes it. He did a great job describing it on my podcast, but I would tell anybody who's interested in this, look for my friend Lex Friedman's podcast with Commander Fravor, because they go deep into the woods about the technical aspects of interacting with it, because it was just him and Lex, whereas on my show it was Jeremy Corbell and me and him, and it was like there was 3 different voices, and it's better with 2. And they really got into it well because Lex had also seen my interview with him and he wanted to talk to him deeper about it. And he discussed the way this thing moved, the way, that it was close enough to him that he could see it with his naked eye. It wasn't this wasn't something he was just looking at on a screen. He absolutely has a deep understanding of the size of aircrafts. He's been flying aircrafts for a long time, fighter jets, and he described it as being about 40 feet long. And he described why he believed it was about 40 feet long. I think that was the number he used.
Yeah.
But he explained how it moved, explained how it actively blocked radar, it actively blocked tracking, which is technically an act of war. He explained how the thing moved from 60,000 feet to 1 foot above sea level in less than a second. They have no idea how it did it. There's no heat signature. They don't know. And then it took off in equal speeds. And then it was observed by the naval base miles away, like instantaneously. They're like, it's over here now. Like, and they're like, what in the fuck is this? And the guys that were talking to him over the walkie-talkie, whatever communication they use, was saying, we get these every couple weeks. That we've had these here before. We don't know what they are, and there you go. Now you've seen it, but they're powerless to do anything about it
because they can't.
They move with a speed that's defies all of our current understandings of how things are able to move through space and time. We don't know what they're doing or how they're doing it or why they're doing it. We don't know where they're from. But if you went and said that's an interdimensional alien, like, well, you're just using words.
Yeah,
like, you don't know
we
what
have
the fuck
no
that is.
idea
We
what
have
that
no
is.
idea what that
Yeah,
is.
So here's my question then. So we got a bunch of people that want to be on your show because they saw Bigfoot or they saw an alien.
Yeah.
We have a guy on your show that says he sounds legit, and then the Navy says he's telling the truth.
Yes.
So it's not a conspiracy theory. These things are real as far as we know. We don't know what they
Right.
are. Why aren't people more curious about the real UFOs?
I think they are.
Okay.
But I think the narrative right now is like, Trump bad, COVID kill you, wear a mask, when do we open up again? There's so many narratives that are real, like things that we
Boring
have
and close and in your face.
we have to deal with real
Yeah.
shit right now. This is which is weird that the Pentagon during the middle of this came out and said that we have recovered crafts that are not of this world. Right.
yeah.
Which really validated what Bob Lazar was saying in the late 80s,
Right.
when he was working at Area S4. I mean, he talked about how these things worked back then. And he talked about their ability to travel the same way that TikTok or Tic Tac thing traveled, and the same way some of the other ones that they've observed have traveled. They traveled in the same way.
And he
They
doesn't
turned
seem
sideways.
that narcissistic. I mean, he seems
No.
like a normal dude, right?
Well,
I mean, I don't know. I had never met him.
He
But
seemed. It's hard to tell.
I shouldn't
right?
admit, yeah.
But his story has been remarkably consistent over more than 30 years.
okay.
And when I was talking to him, he didn't seem full of shit to me. He seemed like a guy who had an insane experience many, many years ago where he was hired by the government to go and try to work out what these things are and how they operate. And they didn't really know how they operated. And they were trying a bunch of different scientists. And part of the problem was that the scientific process requires multiple people collaborating.
Yeah.
And they wanted to shut down all this collaboration because they wanted to keep things very compartmentalized. They didn't want
Yes.
anybody sharing any of this information. And he was absolutely baffled by what these things are and what they did. But his take on it was he had been told many different things. And one of the things he had been told is that these had been here for a long time. And that one of them was from some sort of an archaeological dig. And they had this idea of what they were and where they were from, but he didn't know how much of what they were telling him was just bullshit. So that he would have the wrong information. So if he ever decided to leak it, it would be nonsense. Maybe it was some super complex government program that they were trying to disguise as alien crafts. Like, we don't know. All you know about that Tic Tac thing is that it moves in a way that, as far as our current understanding of how things are able to move,
Doesn't work.
it moves in a way that's infinitely superior. Like, goes 60,000 feet to 1 feet above sea level, like that. And that's just because the radar takes a second to track. They don't even know how fast it went. It might have been instantaneous. So they don't know what is doing that, and how do you do that? Is that Russia? Does China know how to do that? Who knows how to do that? Or is it from another planet? So when the Pentagon says we've recovered things that are not from this world, maybe that's bullshit too. Maybe this is stuff that we have. Maybe this is something that we've developed, and maybe there's no person in it at all. Maybe it's just some sort of an infinitely fast drone that works on this element that's very rare that they figured out how to make in a fucking particle collider or something. I don't know, But he does not seem full of shit.
Right.
Commander Fravor, in no way, shape, or form seems full of shit. He is American as apple pie. He seems 100% legit.
So do you think that when this becomes something people talk about, that will change people's opinions about human events or the human condition.
If we encountered something that is absolutely from another planet, I think it would completely change our perceptions.
It's kind of the fantasy is you'd start getting along with your neighbor a little better if you knew you could be eaten by an alien.
That was Ronald Reagan's speech. Do you remember that speech?
I don't.
It was a great speech.
How do I not remember this?
Back in the 80s, he gave a speech for the United Nations, and he was essentially saying, how quickly would we forget our differences if we were confronted with a threat from an alien world? And all the alien dorks, like myself, were like, dude, he's trying to tell us something. Dude, the aliens
are like
real.
Q back in the day.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And who knows? I mean, maybe he did know something. Maybe they did inform him of something. Yeah. It's a crazy subject, you know, and I think one of the reasons why it's so crazy is we have so much light pollution that we never see the stars for what they really are.
So that's, I mean, part of the issue with the human experience is if you read anything old, it was all based in a world where every night you saw the heavens.
Yeah.
Like a show. It's like watching a Dead show. Every night you looked in the sky and now it's just gone.
Yep.
And so all those stories are lost from us.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, light pollution sucks.
It's weird.
It's weird.
It's really weird that we've sort of accepted it as a necessary consequence of the Western world.
Yeah, but I don't think we know it because most people don't get away and then walk. I mean, you know, I'm out fishing somewhere in the middle of nowhere. You walk out to take a leak at 2 a.m. You look in the sky and you're just like stunned.
Yeah,
this is amazing.
You see the Milky Way.
Milky Way. Yeah. So
I went to Hawaii once. I went to the Keck Observatory. It was one of the greatest experiences of my life. We caught it perfect where there was no moon. It was like you're in a spaceship with a glass ceiling, just flying through the heavens. You saw everything, man. The sky was just littered with stars.
The naked eye up there.
It was incredible. Absolutely incredible. And I still think about it. I wish the sky looked like if the sky looked like that all the time, I think it would be a lot like how we feel when we're next to the ocean.
It'd be like an awe experience. You're
Yeah.
like, you seem like you're a big deal, but did you see the Milky Way last
even
night?
bigger than the feeling of being next to the ocean. I think it'd be even more awe-inspiring, more humbling than the mountains, more humbling than anything that we have here.
Yeah, and it's just not there. I talked to a guy. It was just down in Virgin Islands. Captain Marcus is my captain down there. It's great. Went by a pedo island to check out this.
You went to Epstein Island?
God, yeah.
You could see it. You could drive
crazy.
by it.
Well, I was, the temple he has.
Yes.
So like years ago, I'm looking at this temple. Like I found online. I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I have a buddy, and he's kind of into like occult stuff, and just knows a lot of the theosophy. And the guy's like OTO, man. Like some of that, some of the Crowley stuff, that old magic stuff. I don't even know this old theosophy. I'm like, this is weird. I'm like, this thing's crazy. So I kind of kept an eye on it. And we were over there, and I'm like, dude, I just want to snoob it in. So let's get like a sea bob and go underwater and get in. And the captain's like, you cannot do that. I'm going to get fired and lose my license. And so
is there like protected waters around it?
It's not. It's really easy to see. It's right off the harbor, and it's huge.
So why would you get in trouble for that?
Because people are going on the island, and they're busting them because I wasn't the first idiot.
Wasn't Tim Dillon thinking about doing that?
Yeah, multiple people have done it.
Yeah, I think I've
but
probably...
I try to talk Tim out of it. I'm like, don't get arrested.
Yeah, I was...
Into it.
Yeah. I was not the first idiot, but I was like, it's just so appealing, It's just right there, and there's no guard, and you're like, I could just sneak in like James Bond, but it's huge, and I'm like, what's going on? It's like this guy's a creep. Everyone knew he's a creep.
But he had a temple.
He had a temple.
How weird.
And the top was blown off now from the hurricane.
Really?
It had a big gold dome on it. It's off, and
wow.
It's crazy. Just crazy, that, and I guess that's forgotten now, but that whole thing was just nuts. So anyway.
Yeah. So back to the whole UFO world thing. I think if we saw the stars every night, we'd probably be way more open to the idea of being visited, and we probably expect it,
I think we would probably be waiting for it, and hopefully we killed each other back then too. I guess we killed each other.
Humans
back
have always
then.
killed
We've
each
always
other.
killed each other, but I'd like to think we'd be a little more mellow.
That's one of the more disturbing things about us, right? Is that if you ask people, can you envision a world where there's never war or violence? They'd be like, mm-mm. But it works in small groups.
Yeah.
Like if you, me, and Jamie just lived together on an island, I absolutely 100% believe we would never beat each other up or kill each other.
No, because you're a team. You just got to eat, do cool shit,
exactly.
make stuff.
But once you get to these unmanageable numbers, that's when
Yeah.
you think violence is inevitable. And the lack of communication, you become the other, people become tribal,
Yes.
and then you have violence, and then you have all the things that go along with the bad aspects of humans.
Identity, and it's always that, I don't know if it's the Dunbar number, I don't know if it's when societies get over 150 or 300, but at some point you get somebody with power and he can get a bunch of guards around him and just control the whole thing.
Yep.
And then go to war, and it's a nightmare. That's why these indigenous groups that are left, and there's so few out there because they've all been eaten up by cultures, are so nice to go visit.
Yeah.
Normal people.
Yeah. It's also, they're so romantic to us, because I think there's part of us that understands that the way they're living, it's less complicated. Like, one of the things that we've done by making life so rich and interesting and have so much available to us is we've also complicated things to the point where there's all these problems that they just don't have there without internet connections and electricity and all. Yeah. They're basically subsistence hunters that are also in tune with Mother Gaia.
Yes. Yeah, and it's a hard life, but
so is this one.
This one's hard too, and you sleep better in that one. I mean, I think that life is, I don't know. I was in Mongolia, and we rode with these guys, and we had a translator. This is in the 90s. It was for like 3 weeks. It was awesome. And afterwards, one of the women in the village gave the translator a wolf pelt. And I looked at the guy. I'm like, aren't you going to stay? Do you really want to go back to town? And he was like, I could just live here, you know? He's like, now I'm going back. And that's what happens. You get back.
Your life. Yeah, and then you get used to your life.
And then you're sucked into your life and you're back.
One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is, do you think that one of the reasons why there's so many psychological disorders is that the world has changed faster than people have?
Yes. I mean, how could you make sense of this world? I'm smart and I think about things, and I've studied culture, and about a month and a half or 2 months ago, I was trying to figure it all out. I just sunk into despair. I'm like, it broke me. I'm like, I cannot figure it out. It's chaos.
Yeah.
And maybe it isn't. I just gave up, but I was like, I can't do it.
What seems like there's too many variables.
There's too many variables. It's a multi-variable problem, and it's literally chaos. You can't figure it out. It's too many variables, and all my tools are useless, and I'm just going to resort to prayer and maybe, burning offerings or, Santa or something. I don't know.
The cynical side of me thinks that we're almost being set up for this inevitable symbiotic relationship with technology, that we're eventually being, that's the only way we're going to get out of this is with technology, because our biology is essentially the same as it was 10,000 years ago, something like that, like genetically not very much different.
No,
but the world is infinitely different.
So I mean, this is a can of worms, but this is where you get Neuralink. This is where you get Elon Musk.
Exactly.
And so there's two theories of the self. And one is that the self is sort of an emergent property from the action of neurons in the brain, and that these things interact in a complicated way. And when that happens complicatedly enough, a consciousness emerges, self emerges. And that Elon Musk's crew thinks, well, we'll be able to measure that, we'll get the right software, we'll get the right big data, and we're going to be able to predict your behavior. Same way I can predict a pig's behavior, I'm going to be able to predict you, and then I'm going to be able to make something like you and put it on a computer. Right? I mean, that's the project,
right.
The singularity. That view it drives a lot of what's going on in Silicon Valley. I don't think it's right. I mean, it's essentially rebuilding Frankenstein. Can we take associations and build a human? The problem is the other view suggests there's a soul, that there's something in you that can't be constructed, that there's some consciousness in you that we can't make out of neurons and create. And that's the view that maybe like William James or Carl Jung, or that's the Vedic view. That's the view you see in India and a lot of places. And that view doesn't fit well in psychology because there's not really a good place for the soul since the 50s or 60s. So we have these two views, and we're going to see what happens. That's why I love Elon Musk, because he's freaking going for it. Instead of sitting around thinking, he's doing it. And that's why you need that. Yeah. And I watched this show, and there's some guy like, we're going to solve this. I'm like, you're never going to solve it. But God bless you for trying. I hope you do.
Well, whether he solves it himself or whether we all solve it, and I say we very loosely because I'm not a part of it at all, solve
system,
it collectively over the next 50 or 100 years.
Yeah.
It seems like we're moving in some weird direction.
That's where they want to go. They want us to link us into a computer, and we're going to be aligned with these things.
That's what's spooky.
There's
something spooky about that, because there's something that's exciting about our messy nature. And that's one of the reasons why I think these indigenous cultures are so romantic to us, because they do live in the jungle in this very subsistence-like way that they've been living the same way. They understand the plants and the animals, and they've been living that way for thousands and thousands of years.
I'm trying to understand who I am as a human. I was down in visited the Bushmen down there as a camp, and like safari. This was my kids. I just wanted them to meet the Bushmen because they're old people, and had a guy take us around. I was chatting with them, and I was talking about like hunting, and I like, how do you do it? And he goes, we're predators. We're just like the lions. We just follow the game and eat them. I'm like, oh my God, we're predators. That's what we are. Of course, we're predators. We're awesome.
Just soft predators.
We're just soft.
But that's the trade-off for weapons.
Right.
We figured out weapons.
But this guy was very happy being a predator. It was great. He's like eating oryx. He's just stoked. I'm like, that's a great energy. And I had lost that because you live in these huts, and we don't think of ourselves as predators.
Right.
We're built like predators. Our eyes don't look don't look to the side. We're not scared all the time. I mean, we're the hunter, not the hunted most of the time.
Yeah, but that's what we were genetically.
That's what we're made to be.
Yeah, which is so strange that 10,000 years later we find ourselves in this really weird world where we're in transition. But if you think about just the transition from single-celled organism all the way up to human being, it's got to keep getting more complicated.
Yeah.
That's what everything does.
And you always got to give something to get something. And that's how complexity works.
Right.
I give up my freedom to do whatever I want, but I get society, and society gives me more.
Right.
I give up my peace to be on a team, but the team's better. You
give up your toughness to develop weapons.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, there's that trade-off. And I again, part of me loves this. I'm so into this tech stuff because it's so interesting. On the other hand, I worry about losing our humanness because like I try to spend 1 week a year off the grid, just freezing to death somewhere fishing, no phone, nothing.
It's nice, right?
Oh my God.
Yeah.
It's just sanity. And I never come out of that going, God, I miss the internet. I'm like, God, I wish they blew the internet up.
I did a elk hunt recently, and I was up in the mountains, and there's no cell phone signal there at all. And you sink into it, and you achieve this state of like normalcy again. Like the world seems normal. I wasn't thinking about nearly as many things as I think about here. I'm not inundated, but news and information. You're just out there living in the world.
And you didn't feel like, God, I'm missing that.
No,
it's just,
maybe I would over time.
Yeah,
you do miss loved ones and family.
Well,
but
sure.
You don't necessarily miss the hum of society.
I don't find that at all. But I always come back. You notice I never.
Well, you have a job, man. You got to write books.
It's life. You got to be.
you
got to be a dad.
Yeah.
But I used to go down to Mexico, like surfing down in Cabo, and I come back, and I remember once I came back, and a week later I started screaming at somebody, and my friends pull out this graph, and they'd graph my mood, and they just knew it was going to collapse, and it's like boom, and they just start laughing.
You're back.
You're
look.
back, you idiot. I mean, it's like I can't get enough of this world. So it's a tension though.
Well, we have so many things that we've invested in this world,
and it's great. I don't want to give it up, but for me, I have to unplug in order to plug back in. And I think if I was plugged in all the time, I'd go crazy.
Well, I think these kind of conversations in this book that you wrote, and just understanding how the mind works, it'll help people at the very least manage this weird state that we find ourselves stuck in.
I want people to be able to have some clarity and make some of their own choices, and they can make whichever choices they want.
And when you're informed, you make better choices.
You're informed, you make better choices. Yeah.
All right. Keith, thank you very much.
Oh, thank you.
Why W? What is W, Keith?
William.
Why W? Oh,
So
you don't like William?
No, everybody in my family's William.
Oh, so
my
you just
dad's
took
William,
Keith?
my grandfather's William. We all go by our middle names. Or,
All right.
Yeah, it's just a family
Thanks, brother.
thing.
I really
Thank
appreciate
you.
it. It was a lot of fun.
Great. That was
really
really
enjoyed
fun.
our conversation. Goodbye, everybody.